Welcome to Only Talk Sports. Thank you guys for being here. I've got Austin Williams with me tonight, and we're doing a show tonight talking about the bracket, March Madness, the reveal show. It came out earlier today. You got all the teams, the 68 team bracket, and there's a lot of interesting matchups, and I can't wait to get into it with you, Austin.
I can't wait either, Jeffrey. Thank you for having me on, my guy. This ought to be really interesting, and I can't wait to break them down with you too.
It's going to be awesome. So, of course, at the top of the South region, you've got Alabama playing the winner of those two teams, Southeast Missouri. That's not going to be good. Texas Corpus Christi. That should be an Alabama win unless the impossible happens.
Yeah, Alabama should take care of business. I mean, they shouldn't turn into Virginia here. They should just handle this. Not much to be said on this game.
Mm. Yeah, Alabama's a lot more offense than Virginia, so we both feel for sure that Alabama should win. But then you've got who Alabama, if they win, who they should play, either Maryland or West Virginia. Now, that's a really interesting matchup right there. What are your thoughts on Maryland, West Virginia?
I mean, this is a good 8-9 game because you have Maryland out of the Big Ten and West Virginia out of the Big 12. Two of arguably the best conferences this year and two of the hardest conferences scheduled gauntlets to go through. So both these teams know what it's like to play like the harder teams, to play some of the bigger teams. And I think they're well prepared for this kind of thing. And now to see that these two coaches, Bob Huggins with West Virginia and Maryland's coach, they both understand the grind of playing their conference schedules and getting to this point. And now that they're playing each other, it's going to be kind of interesting to see the strategy that they employ because they both kind of play the same schedule. I honestly think it's going to come down to Eric Stevenson from Virginia. If he gets hot from three, West Virginia could make this a long day for Maryland because Maryland has been known to go cold from the field at times, and when they do that, they tend to lose a bunch of those games. But I think for Maryland, their biggest thing is getting inside the paint, rebounding, crashing the offensive boards. If they could do that, West Virginia is in trouble because West Virginia cannot rebound. They just can't sometimes. Those are the two keys for each of these teams. I think with that being said, I'm kind of leaning towards West Virginia on this because I think at the end of the day, they'll have more three-point offense, and I think that'll just be a little too much for Maryland to overcome. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Oh, I mean, this game, thanks for being here, Easy Money. He's got Roll Tide Roll, and we're talking about the opponent that they should be playing. And you look at this game, I mean, both these teams, I mean, like you said, they play in the toughest conferences in college basketball, the deepest conferences anyway. And Bob Huggins, I mean, he has the experience factor of having coached so many teams in NCAA tournaments in the past. So that's the advantage for West Virginia. And you look at, like you said, Eric Stevenson, he's a fantastic player. He transferred in from South Carolina. Joe Toussaint as well, transferred in from Iowa at point guard. But like you said as well, West Virginia is not a great rebounding team. They do get destroyed on the glass. But Maryland, they're not the biggest team in the world, even though Julian Reese is a solid post player. He's not one of those dominating bigs in the Big Ten. And to your point, referencing the Maryland coach, Kevin Willard, the first-year head coach that came from Seton Hall, he doesn't have as much experience as Bob Huggins, even though when it comes to tournament games, sometimes that doesn't matter. The players, some people would argue the players are more important than the coaches, but the coaches still matter preparing for the players for these games. I think it's going to be one of the closer games in the tournament. I mean, the 8-9 games are, always between two teams that are relatively even. I would almost say I think Maryland would have an advantage in a way because of the fact West Virginia played in the gauntlet of the Big 12. And even though that would make them more prepared, it would also make them more exhausted, the endurance of the season. But to your point, it's going to basically come down to which team rebounds better and which team makes more shots. I think Maryland will have the advantage with the rebounding. West Virginia will have advantage more with the three-point shooting. So it's going to be a really close game either way. but I could definitely see either team winning. But with the experience of Huggins, and if they can hit their 3-point shots, I do agree with you. I think West Virginia has a better chance to advance, but I could see Maryland for sure getting this win. It's going to be a really good game.
Yeah, it ought to be a fun game. The 8-9s always deliver. It seems like those are always the best games of the first round a lot of times. So we shall see.
Before we move on, easy money. So I'm proud of my Crimson Tide. They won the SEC regular season and the SEC tournament championship. Now they're the number 1 overall seed in the Big Dance. Great accomplishment for sure. I mean, they're a team that's definitely improved from where they were, a couple years ago before Nate Oates got there. So it's amazing, and they're definitely well deserving of that 1 seed. Tennessee Vols for Life's a great show, Jeffrey. Thanks for being here, Tennessee Vols for Life. We got Austin here as well. It's going to be awesome, man. We're just started. So our next game, we got San Diego State and Charleston. That's a sneaky one right there. That could be a really good game. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this game right here is going to be fun. I look for a high-scoring game in this one because Charleston could score and San Diego State could score. But the thing that sets these two apart is San Diego State has some really tough defense. As Charleston, their defense lacks a bit, and that kind of worries me because it's good if you can put up 90 points and all that. That's good, but where you also have to have defense in there, you have to have that balance. At San Diego State, they could get in shootouts, but they can also beat you in a slugfest. I don't think Charleston can do that necessarily. Like if this game's in the low 60s, 50s, this is San Diego State's type of game to win. If it gets in the 80s, 90s, I think this is Charleston's game, and in just an incredible season by Charleston, 31-3. I mean, no one thought of them to get this far, and San Diego State winning the Mountain West. I mean, a very tough conference. I mean, it's a very underrated conference. It's not up there with the Big 12 and Big 10, but it's very underrated, and they should get props for winning it. But in this tournament game here between these two, I think it'll be a competitive game. I'm gonna go San Diego State though. I feel their defense is gonna make their pressure Charleston shooters. They're not gonna have a very good night from the 3, and it's gonna make life tough. And I think San Diego State thrives in that kind of game, and I think their defense overall wins it for them. I think San Diego State wins.
Easy Money says, how many SEC teams made the tournament? I forgot to check offhand. I'm guessing 8 or so. 8 teams is how many they got. Just like the Big Ten, both conferences got 8 teams. So looking at this game, like you said, San Diego State, Charleston, I think this is a very underrated game. Could sneakily be one of the better games of the first round. Charleston was a team that, even though they, to a lot of people, had to win the conference tournament to get in, I mean, they had a case for an at-large because they only lost 3 games, just like Florida Atlantic, but I guess they didn't have as good of a resume as Florida Atlantic. Hello, Hummus Hero. Thanks for being here as well. And, I mean, I think that Charleston's a really good team. I mean, they only lost to North Carolina in the non-conference, which I know North Carolina didn't have their best season, but they did compete in that game. They played really well all season, but they just didn't play that many high-profile teams. San Diego State, like you said, and you're absolutely correct, the Mountain West is really good. They actually said that overall from top to bottom that the Mountain West was a better conference, by the net rankings from top to bottom than the Pac-12 and the ACC. So, I mean, when the Mountain West is higher than Power 5 or Power 6 conference teams, that goes to show you the depth of the conference. So many teams were really good from that league, UNLV, Utah State, Nevada, all those teams, Boise State. So San Diego State, they were the best team of all of them. So like you said, if they play really good defense and they're able to knock shots down, which they do struggle on the offensive end at times, which is a cause for concern with them. They are a good team, but their offense can fall asleep. And like you said, if Charleston can make shots and San Diego State struggling to make shots, then they can pull off this upset. But the defense of San Diego State is a defense that Charleston has not faced a lot this season. That there's not been many defensive teams Charleston has had to play of San Diego State's caliber. So overall, I think it's going to be a game of different styles, but defense in games like this usually finds a way to rule the day. So I'm gonna go with San Diego State as well. More than likely, I could see Charleston win, but San Diego State, they have a really good shot to win this one.
Yeah, styles make fights, as the old saying goes, and this is the classic example of it. You've got the defensive team of San Diego State and the offense of Charleston. Who wins the day? We'll find out.
So up next, we got Virginia and Furman. Now, obviously, Virginia, a 4 seed, Furman, the 13. It should be an easy win for Virginia, but their offense can completely fall asleep at times. Their defense is really good. It's Tony Bennett. I mean, their defense is really good, but this one could be interesting. What are your thoughts on this game?
Boy, Jeffrey, you said it all in one swoop there. Virginia's offense. Here's the thing. If there's any team that I'm gonna show my concern for in this entire thing, it's Virginia. They worry me a little too much because their offense goes on these 8-10 minute droughts where they do not score. And it's okay when you're playing teams like Boston College and Georgia Tech and those kind of teams. You could get away with not scoring for almost 10 minutes. But when you play the bigger and better teams, that's going to get you beat. And this game right here against Furman, this is a upset alert for Virginia if they're not careful. Because if they get in that slump and Furman starts to hit a couple shots and gets the feeling themselves, we could be on the verge of another upset. And Virginia's a little familiar with upsets now. We all remember in 2017, the year 2018, before they won the national title. We all remember what happened. They don't want to repeat here. But I think this very well could come down to if Virginia's offense shows up, they can win this game very easily to go on with that defense. But their offense doesn't show up, Furman can very much win this game because they could shoot the three and they could score. But I think I'm going to pick Virginia to win this game. I'm going to trust that their offense will show up, hopefully. But if not, I think Furman could win this game. But I'm going to say Virginia just off the fact that I think they're the better team. But it's March Madness, and this is what you love about it. You never know.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Out of, a lot of these, 4 seeds and higher versus 13s and lower, this is the game that you could easily see an upset. And I could definitely see Furman pulling this one off. Virginia, it is really tough to beat them when their defense completely controls the game, especially when you have a team like Furman that is more up and down, shooting the 3 ball. And Virginia's just dominating, their style of play. They're shortening the game, making it a 40s and 50s type game. Virginia's dangerous in that regard. But all it takes is for a team like UMBC, the way they did, and a Furman in this game here, to knock some shots down, blow the game open where they're up by 10 to 12 points. And then Virginia starts to panic because they want to be the ones with the lead. They want to control the style of play. And when they get down, their style of play does not allow them to come back in games. So if you look at in that respect, if Furman gets a 30 to 20 lead on Virginia, like in the first half or start of the second half, I could easily see Virginia losing this game. But if Virginia is able to slow the game down, make Furman uncomfortable, and make it a 50 to 48 style of game, Virginia's coming out on top. They'll find a way to win that. But if Furman can blow it open, then I think that Furman can get the win because Furman's really good. They showed that in their conference. I think overall that this is the game that you could have an upset. I think Virginia could go down. I think Furman can really win this game. I'm not saying that Virginia will lose. Because again, we're kind of like just, overall just talking about the, weaknesses and strengths of all these teams. But if I had to see an upset, I could easily see this one happen. And I would even lean Furman's way. But Tony Bennett is a really good coach. I'm sure he'll get his team prepared. But their offense is really bad. It falls asleep. And if Furman hits more than 6-7 threes in the game, they could easily beat Virginia.
Yeah, we could see a repeat of 2018 if that happens.
Definitely won't be as big of a magnitude of an upset considering they're not a 1 seed this year, but still would be huge. So up next, you've got the Creighton Blue Jays. and the NC State Wolfpack in the 6-11 game. This is an interesting game because, on paper, you're probably looking at this game as Creighton's way better. They're the higher seed for a reason, and they struggled early, but they really got things together in the second half of the season. They got healthy. They started rolling through Big East play. And NC State playing the ACC. Should they even be in the tournament? The ACC was down this year, but all that kind of stuff. But this is still a game where Creighton could slip up. The 6th seed loses a lot of the time. They say historically, of all the seeds that are higher, the 6th seed loses the most often to the lower seed. So this should be a good game. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, the 6-11 matchups are usually always delivered to in the tournament. And like you said, with Creighton, they had a bunch of injuries, and they kind of struggled when a lot of their key players went down, like most good teams do. But when they got healthy, they showed what kind of team they can be. They showed that they could be an Elite Eight team, and that's one of the things too that you find out about your team when the players go down or when they get healthy again. You kind of see these teams kind of form around February and March. I think Creighton's finally hitting their stride again, and I think they're coming into this tournament on the right track. And now NC State's a different story. They got housed by Clemson in the ACC tournament, and I mean housed. And their confidence is not the best. And a lot of Clemson fans out there are saying, why is NC State here? We beat them 3 straight times. That should be us here, not them. Well, NC State has a lot of good quad one wins, and I think the committee understands that. And Clemson, from their point of view, you shouldn't have lost to the teams that you lost to. You lost to Louisville. You lost to Louisville, and you lost to all these other bad teams. And it's like, you can't be doing that if you want to be a tournament team. But in this game here, though, this is really interesting because both these teams could shoot the three. And NC State, they're a team that likes to run out in transition and shoot the three. That's one of the things. Creighton's more of set offense, get the guy open in the corner or at the top of the key, get them in organized. As Brad Nessler would say, get the puppies organized. But and another thing that NC State does really well is when they get offensive rebounds and kick out for threes, they beat teams a lot with that. And that's the thing that worries me about Creighton. If they can't get on the defensive glass, NC State's going to have a field day with them because they can rebound. And if they get those threes going in transition and get those offensive rebounds and they leaving shooters open for three off the offensive rebound, NC State could blow this game wide open because they've done it multiple times this year. And being a Louisville fan, we played them twice this year. And we couldn't rebound against them. And they blew us open multiple times, 20, 25 points. That's not saying much because we're not very good, but it just goes to show that NC State is dangerous if they get the offensive rebound. But Creighton, on the other hand, if they get their shots set and they're hitting their threes, and they're also a dangerous team. This all depends on who controls the 3-point line and who controls the glass. Like a lot of teams in these tournaments. But with all that being said, I think this is one of those games where I kind of flip-flopped on because it could go either way. I'm taking NC State this game. I'm thinking NC State's going to crash the offensive glass. They're going to make more threes. And I think they're just going to play with more energy than Creighton. I think NC State wins this game. I think it's close, though.
Yeah, that was fantastic analysis between the two teams. I can definitely, see NC State getting the win. And to your point about the Clemson, NC State debate, again, like you said, Clemson had the bad losses to Louisville, Loyola, Chicago, South Carolina. And it's unfortunate, too, because they didn't lose those games, they're easily in. And I know Clemson's not a brand team in basketball, but they still would have made the tournament if they didn't have those losses. The committee really does not like quad 4 losses. They cannot stand them. When you have them, it weigh you down a lot more than a quad 2 or a quad 1 loss does. That's why a team like West Virginia at the top of this bracket had 14 losses and they made the tournament because they didn't have any bad losses and they had quality wins. But for NC State, like you said, they got swept by Clemson 3 times. They lost to them. They struggled, at times throughout the season. But when they're playing well, they're actually a really good team. Terquavian Smith, he's a player that a lot of people felt should have went to the draft last year. He's a really good player. Jarkel Joyner was a really good transfer addition for NC State. Kevin Keats has his team playing really well. But the center position is an issue for NC State. They don't have good post play. Their post presence isn't really there. And I think that if you look at, the guard play for NC State is strong, but so is Creighton's. They have good guards as well. Trey Alexander's really good. Ron Nimhart is really good. And they also have Arthur Kaluma, who's a really good forward, who has a lot of skill, even though he is turnover prone, but he is really skillful. But the biggest key for me, why I think NC State's going to struggle, is Ryan Kalkbrenner at center. I don't know if NC State can stop him because he's 7 foot and he can rebound, he can shoot, and NC State just doesn't have a player to match that. If they allow Ryan Kalkbrenner to have a 20 and 15 game, I think Creighton wins this one because I think their guards are going to score enough points. But if they're able to find a way to get Ryan Kalkbrenner in foul trouble or at least slow him down enough, I think NC State can win. But I'm probably going to lean Creighton here. I think Greg McDermott, he has one of his best teams that Creighton's ever had. And if it wasn't for an injury to him earlier in the year, they'd probably be a 3 or 4 seed right now in this tournament. So they're a really good team. And NC State, they've been very inconsistent. When they're playing well, they're a really good team, but they have not shown to be a consistent enough team, to win a game like this. I'm probably leaning more toward Creighton, even though I definitely could see NC State getting the win. We got definitely a lot of comments here. Real quick and run through. Easy Money says Penn State was actually impressed with getting through the Big Ten tournament and almost upset Purdue in the end. Wild finish for sure. That was a great game. He also says Texas Longhorns are playing good. Troy V says, I filled out a bracket and watched 0 minutes of basketball. Hoping for that guy knows nothing. Look, laughing out loud. Easy Money says, I enjoy your occasional commentary on Mark Rogers' show too, everybody. Y'all on Roll Tide Roll later. Thanks for being here. Easy Money. Edward says NC State isn't that good. They lost to Clemson 3 times by 65. For sure. We knew Edward was going to come by with that. You're absolutely right. You've got Michael. He says A&M to Sweet 16 is a lock. Clint Moses says go Beavs for sure. And Troy says only lock in these teams is there will be one team nobody heard about. They'll destroy a region with upsets. You never know. It definitely could happen. But our next game, this one's probably one of the easier ones. Baylor versus, California Santa Barbara. I mean, Baylor's got great guard play. They are a little weak, in the post. Not as strong as they've been in years past. But Baylor going up against UC Santa Barbara. What's your take on this one?
Yeah. I mean, Baylor, in all honesty, when healthy, they look like a national title team, Final Four team when they're healthy because their defense is still very good. It's not as elite as it was when they won the title, but it's still very good. Mm-hmm. But they should, all honesty, win this game, no problem. But what concerns me is if they're not healthy, this could be another upset game because if LJ Cryer isn't there or George isn't there, those are 2 big hits. And there are a lot of Baylor's offense. And that's a lot of production they're missing. And UNC, the Gachos, as they say, is a team not to be messed with because a couple years ago they gave Creighton a pretty good game when in the tournament. So this team can give Baylor a really good game. But I think Baylor should win this game if healthy. If not healthy, this game could be another upset alert. I'm going to say Baylor wins this, but don't be surprised if it's closer than a 10-point game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely correct about Baylor and their injuries. They have not been a healthy team all year. Jonathan Chama-Chachua, he missed most of the first half of the season. He's returned, but Keontae George, LJ Cryer have been banged up. If Baylor's not healthy, they could lose this game. But still, even if they're not 100%, I just feel like Baylor's really strong as a team, and they'll find a way to at least get by, UC Santa Barbara. But still, it probably will be closer than it should be if they're not 100%. But I do think Baylor will win at the end of the day. Like you said, they're a really strong team. Clint Moses even says should break down NIT and CBI tournament matches. Maybe we could touch on it toward the end if he's still here and it's not too late. But we got a lot of games to get through for sure. But we both agree Baylor should probably get the win. Next game's another sneaky one. You've got Missouri and Utah State, the 7-10 matchup in the South. I mean, again, a lot of people would just look at that and say, oh, the SEC team should get the win. But the Mountain West is a tough league. So what's your take on this game?
Yeah, Missouri, Utah State. This is, like you said, Jeffrey. This is a sneaky good game. I think I'll probably be watching this one. Who am I kidding? I will be watching every game, but this game here has the potential to be a really, really good game because, like you said, they look at it and say, "Oh, it's the SEC. The SEC should just dominate, right? They're the best conference."
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, though. Missouri, congratulations to them for getting to the tournament because their program hasn't always been a tournament program either. This is their first year back in the tournament since I want to say 17, maybe 16 in that line. But they're going up against a really good Utah State team, a team that was on the bubble for a while there. That a lot of people were thinking, oh, would they maybe miss the cut because the committee didn't think they had enough quad one wins or anything of that nature or quad twos and all that. Mm-hmm. They made the cut and they made a 10 seed, which they rightfully should have because they played in a very tough Mountain West. And I think Utah State's built for this. I think Utah State could be a Sweet 16 team because I think they could beat Missouri. I really do because I think their defense, the defense in the Mountain West is no joke. And Missouri, the best defensive team they played all year was Alabama and maybe A&M and Tennessee. And I think that's going to help Missouri too to an extent, but also Utah, you just can't prepare for different defenses because Utah doesn't run the same defense as those other three. And I honestly think this is upset city. I think Utah State wins this game. I think their defense smothers Missouri. Missouri doesn't get in the paint as much as they would like. They don't get as much comfortable on their 3-pointers as they like. I think Missouri goes down this game. I'm going Utah State. I think the Aggies pull off an upset here. I think their defense is going to be too much for them.
That's a really good pick. I think that you look at this game, and I completely agree, upset city could be at hand because Missouri, they're a good team. And I don't think the SEC obviously was not a bad conference this year. There was a lot of really good teams. But outside of Alabama, a lot of the teams were beatable, night in and night out. There wasn't really, many teams that were like at the top. Kentucky wasn't at the top of the league like normal. It just wasn't like 3 or 4 teams at the top and then everyone else. Missouri benefited from the SEC kind of having a bunch of teams that were not as good as normal, and it was more even, and they got some good wins. Arkansas didn't have, the season a lot of people thought that they were because of injuries. Just a lot of teams. Auburn was kind of up and down. They were beatable. And Missouri found a way to beat some of these teams. But Utah State, like you said, the Mountain West is probably the most, underrated conference in the country. Because, again, it is a tough league. Every team played hard, especially the top 5 or 6 teams in the league. I mean, you had a team like New Mexico that at one point was ranked in the top 25, and they got, basically at one point they were the only undefeated team, and then they just got, belted by the other teams. All those teams at the top just beat them in a row. Utah State, Nevada, San Diego State, they all beat New Mexico, and they fell out of the tournament. And New Mexico missed the whole entire thing. They were really good, and then they just fell apart because that's what the Mountain West, could do to you. That's just how good the conference was overall. So Utah State, they have good guards. They have, fundamental basketball players that don't make a lot of mistakes. Sometimes you see some of these smaller conference teams, the players are just really fundamental. They don't make errors. That's why Loyola Chicago made it to the Final Four because of fundamental basketball, timely buckets. I agree with you. I think Utah State can get this win. I mean, Missouri, they're the better team. They have more talent. They're in the SEC. but they're not a proven team, even though they have had a good season. But I do think that Utah State has the advantage here. And if they play their style of basketball to their advantage, I think they definitely can get this win.
Will be interesting.
So the last game in the South region is Arizona and Princeton. Yeah, this game, I mean, upsets can happen, but Arizona's a really good basketball team. But Princeton, they won the Ivy League. They've been playing really well. What's your take on this one?
I mean, Arizona coming off a thrilling Pac-12 title game against UCLA. What a game that was. Arizona showed a lot of heart in that game because they could have easily packed it in after getting beat with that half-court shot against Arizona State. A lot of teams would have just packed it in and said, just demoralizing. Arizona State kept their head up. They kept playing, and they ultimately won the Pac-12. And I think they got a lot of momentum on their side. And I think Princeton, they beat Yale in the title game today. Won the Ivy League title, after getting swept in the regular season by Yale. They finally were able to dethrone on the Bulldogs of Yale. But I just don't think this is an even matchup because I think Arizona, if they're healthy and they're playing their best basketball, that they should cruise to a win here because Princeton doesn't match up with them very well. Princeton, if they're hitting their shots and are playing their best basketball, maybe there's a little hope. But even then, I think Arizona is just too dominant in the paint. I think they'll out rebound them, and I think they'll get enough help from the 3-point line. I think they'll overwhelm Princeton. I think Arizona wins this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Princeton, like you said, they beat Yale in the Ivy League, title game. They're really good. I mean, they have, scrappy players, smart players that, they play well on both sides of the ball. But Arizona, I mean, Azuolas Tubelis is going to be a matchup nightmare for Princeton. They're not going to be able to, slow him down. You saw UCLA, they didn't have a Dim Bona. He was out hurt. And UCLA did not really have a center that could slow down, a backup center that could slow down Azuolas Tubelis. He dominated UCLA, and he should dominate Princeton. And Arizona didn't even shoot that well against UCLA, found a way to win. If Arizona starts making threes, if Kirk Reese is knocking shots down, then they will easily beat Princeton. If they're not hitting their shots, I think it will be a closer game, but Azuolas Tubelis should be enough. Tommy Lloyd has a really good team. Umar Ballo as well. He's, a big player down low. And I just don't think overall that Princeton can match up with either player. They'll try, but they're going to fall short. I do think Arizona is by far going to be, easily get this win. Thanks for being here, Scott Arnold. He says of the 1s and 2 seeds, Houston, UCLA are the most likely to lose. Northern Kentucky is tourney tested, and Sasser might be hurt. UCLA is playing without a key player, and don't sleep on UNC Asheville. I agree with all those statements for sure. We would definitely be getting to some of those teams. But this was the South region. We're, pretty confident in Alabama. We like West Virginia, San Diego State. We feel like they're doing, in good shape. Furman could beat Virginia. And, we're split on Creighton, NC State. Baylor, is looking good, even though they have some injuries. Utah State, we feel has a really good shot to beat Missouri and Arizona. So that should be a really fun bracket.
Yes, it should be. And I'll throw this out here. I think the best game in this bracket is going to be Missouri Utah State. I think it'll be the best game in this bracket. I think it has potential to be.
For sure, either that game or probably Maryland, West Virginia. Either or should be awesome. So on to our next region, we have the East region. And at the top again, you've got presumably an easy matchup, an automatic victory. But some people aren't, sold on Purdue. So you've got Texas Southern they could play, or Fairleigh Dickinson. Now a lot of people obviously are saying that Texas Southern's the worst team in the tournament. They're 14-20. So people assume Fairleigh Dickinson will win. But how do you feel Purdue will match up with either of those teams?
I mean, when you have Zach Edey, you match up with just about anybody pretty well. I know that's a cop-out, but it's true because he draws a lot of attention to detail. in the Big Ten tournament today. Penn State, they were doubling, tripling, and when that happens, he could just kick it to a wide open guy for three. And if his guys are hitting shots, Purdue's a tough out to beat if that's happening. And you know, and Indiana knows this firsthand what it's like to play Purdue. You played them twice, and it took everything you had just to beat them. And I think in the 116, presuming for Zach Edey doesn't get hurt or if he has an off night, maybe there's a chance for one of those two. But I think Purdue should roll in this game, whoever they play. I think Purdue should roll because a lot of people are saying this is the year they go to the Final Four. Well, this is how it starts.
Yeah, I think that Purdue, even though a lot of people think that, you know, they're could be on upset alert early on in the tournament because some people think they're overrated. The guard play isn't that good. Zach Edey, you know, he's only going to be able to do so much. But to your point, this game is not going to be where they lose. Either team is not going to be able to match up with Zach Edey. It should be a big night for him. He should have 30 and 15, even though, to Edward's point, Purdue has that guy with bricks for feet. He you know, talking about Zach Edey not being very quick, but it won't matter against either of these opponents. They should get this win, but it could be interesting as, you know, the bracket further goes along, you know, if Purdue gets the first win, how they match up later on down the road. So on to the next game. This one is really interesting. Memphis and Florida Atlantic. You've got an American Conference team, a Conference USA. I mean, this one's really interesting. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, this is another good 8-9 game. That's 2 in a row now. And Florida Atlantic, what a surprise they were this year to a lot of people. You know, they got some respect here. Because normally they don't put Conference USA that high. Normally the 9 seeds preserved for the SECs and the Big 12s and the Big 10s and ACCs of the world. But they got some respect for the Conference USA and Florida Atlantic. And Memphis, you know, what a great win they got today, winning the American Conference title over number 1 Houston, which we'll get to in a bit. That's another great win. Penny Hardaway has got Houston back on the right track. And I think this game here could go either way because Florida Atlantic, they are a really solid basketball team. They can defend, they can shoot, they can play in transition. This team's equipped to play any style you would like. And Memphis, they're a team that likes to play. They're a physical team. They like to play in the post, and they like to go to the mid range a lot. And when they take threes, they don't shoot them at a high percentage, which is worrisome because if you go cold from three or can't hit a three, that could cost you against some of these other teams that can hit them. But this game here is going to come down to who's crashing the offensive glass and defensive glass, who gets more second chance points, and who's hitting their shots the most. And what's the pace of the game? If we're playing fast, that favors FAU. If we're playing slow, I think this favors in Memphis's way. I think this will be a really close game, but I'm picking FAU. I think they hit their threes, and I think they out hustle Memphis. And I think FAU, the number 9 seed, beats Memphis.
That is a really good pick. I will say though, for Memphis, it's all going to come down to their level of hustle as well. And to your point, Florida Atlantic, they're the really small conference team, and they're going to play really hard in this game. But if Memphis plays like they did against Houston today, you know, or technically yesterday now, if they play like that, Memphis will win because Memphis played it great. Now, yes, Marcus Sasser, you know, he was out for Houston. That really makes a difference. Maybe Memphis wouldn't have won if he was playing, but still, Memphis played a great game. And Memphis is playing really good basketball as of late. They dominated Tulane, you know, the game before that. They're peaking at the right time. Florida Atlantic, I mean, they've had a great year, and they deserve to be, you know, a 9 seed. But it's one of those situations as well where they've been in, you know, Conference USA play for a long time. They haven't, you know, played a game against a higher, you know, type team, a Power 5 level team in a long time. And yes, Memphis is an American Conference team, but Memphis is, they have the talent of a Power 5 or Power 6 team. Memphis has NBA level talent. Penny Hardaway has put together a really good roster. Kendrick Davis is a really good player. He's been banged up recently, but if he's healthy, he is one of the best guards in the country that no one talks about, even though some people know him, but he's really good, averages over 20 points. I mean, he's definitely a bucket getter. DeAndre Williams, if he doesn't get in foul trouble, he's a really great player. Memphis just has a good team. They have a really talented team. They have to not turn the ball over, though. Sometimes they do make silly mistakes. They turn the ball over unnecessarily. But if Memphis can out-hustle Florida Atlantic, who I agree with you for sure, I think they will definitely hustle hard because they're in this position and they're going to want to get the win to prove that they belong, that they deserve the non-seed. But if Memphis plays like they have the last few games, I think they will get this win. I'm leaning towards Memphis. I think that they're going to find a way to out-hustle Florida Atlantic. Their talent's going to find a way to win. It should be a great game, but I think that Memphis will find a way. That game should be really good. The next game we got, Duke and Oral Roberts. This one's interesting because Duke is everybody's team that could go to the Final Four right now. A lot of people are, looking at, Duke is the hottest team in the country. They've been on a roll since that Virginia game with Kyle Filipowski getting fouled at the end. They didn't call it. And ever since then, Duke's on a revenge tour. But you've got Oral Roberts, Max Amos. I mean, he is a fantastic scorer, and they're dangerous. Oral Roberts is a really good team. What is your take on this game here?
Yeah, like you said, Jeffrey, Duke's on the hottest roll, and Oral Roberts, the Cinderella team from a couple years ago, no longer the Cinderella. They're a team that could make a run at it now. And I will say this, if people are not careful, this could be another upset city because Oral Roberts, they can play. Max Amos, he can shoot the lights out. He's really good. And Duke, their turning point in the season, they lost to Miami, Florida at home on the road, excuse me. That was the big turning point. And Jeffrey mentioned it moments ago that the foul, I can't say his name, Filipowski foul, that the no call, whether that should have been a foul, should Duke have won that, all that. Those were the two turning points. And ever since then, Duke's been on the hottest roll. Proctor's been playing really well. Lively is playing up to his potential, the defensive stopper in many people's books. I just think Duke's just too hot right now. I think Oral Roberts, I know they're a feel-good story. Maybe a lot of people think that they're going to beat Duke, and this Duke is not with Coach K. If this was Coach K Duke, this is obviously an easy win. I don't think this game's going to be an easy win for Duke. I think they should win, but I think Duke, they are the hottest team going right now, and I think Oral Roberts is going to struggle. They're not going to be able to play their type of game. Lively is gonna be a disruptance, and Proctor, I think, is gonna hit his shots, and I think Duke's just gonna be firing on all cylinders. I got Duke winning this game.
Yeah, I think that if you look at this matchup right here, Oral Roberts, like you said, is a team that could make a run because of the fact they have Max Amos and because of the fact they're just a really good team. They make shots, and they're one of the better, small conference teams for sure. And like you said, they're on everybody's radar because of the fact of what they did a couple years ago, beating Ohio State. They gave Arkansas a scare. So they're definitely a team to watch out for. But I think getting matched up with Duke, it was one of the worst matchups they could possibly get because Duke is a team on a roll. If they were playing a team that was kind of limping down the stretch of the season and they had to play, somebody like that, then maybe they could find a way to get a surprise. But it's like for Duke, the way they're playing and the fact that Oral Roberts is known, so it's not as big of a surprise if they win, I think that hurts them. I think Duke's going to be more ready for them knowing that Oral Roberts is capable. And that really hurts their chances. And again, the way Duke's playing, just a bad matchup overall for Oral Roberts. They're not going to be able to slow down Kyle Filipowski. They have no matchup for him. and that is not going to help them on that side of the ball. Oral Roberts is going to have to put up points to win. Now, Duke, he did struggle on offense against Virginia, but a lot of teams do the way Virginia's defense is. So I still think Duke's playing really good on offense. Derek Lively, he's a shot blocking machine. So if Max Amos is trying to drive to the hoop to lay it in, Derek Lively is going to block that almost every single time. So Max Amos is going to have to shoot his way out of this game. And Oral Roberts is going to have to make a lot of threes. And they are capable of that. But if they don't hit at least 10 threes in this game, they're more than likely not going to win because they're not going to be able to get layups on Lively, especially Amos. And I think Filipowski can have a big game. And as long as Duke's guards don't turn it over because they are a little sloppy at times, as long as they don't have more than 10, 12 turnovers, Duke should, I wouldn't say fairly easily win this game, but they could get a comfortable 10 to 12 point win over Oral Roberts with everything that, the circumstances at play, with Oral Roberts being known the way Duke's playing. I do think Duke has a big advantage here. Hopefully it's a really good game, though. So our next game up next, we got Tennessee. You've got Louisiana. This is an interesting game here because Tennessee's been struggling as of late. A lot of people are looking at Tennessee as a team that always finds a way to lose early. What do you think about this game?
To your point, Jeffrey, about limping down the stretch, Tennessee is the epitome of limping down the stretch. That they've had a rough go at it. They beat Alabama, and everyone was thinking this is the momentum boost Tennessee needs, and this is what's going to propel them to possibly finally reach with their potential. And it's been the opposite ever since that Bama game. They've won some and they've lost some, and and this is the thing too. Louisiana is not a team to be messed with because Louisiana, I think, this is another upset city game. Because if Tennessee, they lost Mekhi Ziegler, that he's a big loss because he's a guy who could shoot the three. He could take you off the dribble, drive, take you to the paint, and he was a lot of Tennessee's offense. And without him being there, I think this is a game Louisiana can win because Louisiana can shoot the three. They play really good in transition. I'm struggling with this one because this is a game where we could see it. The classic Tennessee loses first game, but I think Tennessee. I think they'll have enough though. I think they'll win the day with their defense. I think Louisiana hasn't seen a defense like theirs, and I think Tennessee will make just enough threes. And they'll get ahead by enough that Louisiana will be forced to be played out of their style of game and play into Tennessee's hands. I think the Vols win this game. I think Tennessee advances, but I'm not confident in that because this could easily go the other way.
Thanks for being here, Tim. Great stuff, Austin Jeffrey. That's awesome, man. Thank you. There's a lot of awesome games here, and like you said, with Tennessee, Louisiana, I mean, Tennessee, for whatever reason, with Rick Barnes, and when Rick Barnes was at Texas, he always loses early. I mean, that is like the only thing keeping Rick Barnes from people saying that he's a Hall of Famer, as a head coach, because he always loses early in the tournament. They play great in the regular season, and then they just lose early in the tournament. I mean, I've probably seen 3 or 4 tournaments in my life already where people said, that a Rick Barnes-led team can win it all or at least go to the Final Four, and then they lose before the Sweet 16. It's happened several times, and no one's saying that Tennessee's going to the Final Four right now this year, but still, Tennessee has a good team. But to your point, Zakai Ziegler, his injury is massive because of the fact he runs the team. I mean, he controls their offense, and Julian Phillips just doesn't provide. Santiago Vescovi's a great player. He's a fantastic shooter for Tennessee, but he's not a guy that's supposed to run the offense. That's supposed to be Zakai Ziegler. He can't play, so that's a big issue. Like you said, Louisiana, they shoot the ball, and I could definitely see an upset. But you kind of feel like this one's too easy, too. You almost feel like this isn't too easy of, this is Tennessee's going down. Like, it's one of those things where it's like Oral Roberts, they're going to beat, whoever they play, they're going to advance. it's one of those things sometimes where it seems so likely or then it doesn't happen. So with that being said, I do think Tennessee finds a way to win this one, even though I definitely could see them losing. I mean, they always lose early. This is a prime spot, but it just seems too easy. I don't think Tennessee will advance far, but I do think they'll find a way to win this game. But it's not going to be by a lot.
Yeah, and to your quick point, though, at the beginning of the year, Tennessee was a lot of people's pick to be in the Final Four and championship this year. And then coming down the stretch with the injuries and it kind of derailed it. And now people are like, Tennessee may be lucky just to get to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it is what it is for them. But like you said, I mean, at the beginning of the season, they were, but definitely not now. But if they can get this win, maybe they can start building some momentum to make a run. Now, then this game right here, this one's interesting. You've got Kentucky as a 6 seed. A lot of people feel Kentucky probably should be a little lower, the way they were playing, for a long stretch of the season. But they did get some good wins. But they're at the 6 seed playing 11 seed Providence. Out of the Big East, Providence somehow is the 11 seed. I thought they'd be an 8 seed or a 9 seed, but they're an 11 seed. This is a really interesting 6-11 game. What is your thoughts on this one?
Well, first off, I want to let it be known I'm going to try not to let my bias bleed through here. I don't like Kentucky. Never will. I'll try to be fair here to all the Cats fans out there. But this is actually going to be an interesting game because you got Oscar Sheetway, who's a dominating force down in the low post area, and he runs the Kentucky offense. There's no other way to say it. He has been the guy that has made that machine go, and there's no question about that. And for Providence on the other hand, Bryce Hopkins, the guy who was at Kentucky last year, transferred out, comes into Providence with Coach Cooley, who he's mentioned multiple times was a mentor and who originally recruited him to Providence before he went to Kentucky. Now he's come back, and Hopkins is he was in the conversation for Big East Player of the Year. A lot of people said he should have gotten some love and maybe been considered for Player of the Year because he's played at such a great level. But this game's going to come down to if Providence can stop Sheekway and force him to be a passer, Kentucky's in trouble because Sheekway and Kentucky, how they run is if Sheekway's getting in the post and he's scoring efficiently and then he starts to get the passing game going, Kentucky's hard to stop at that point. But if you make Sheetway just a primary passer, making Toppin and Matthews and the other guys hit their shots, and if they're not hitting that night or they're turning the ball over and being sloppy, Kentucky can get beat. And it's very much a possibility. But for Providence on the other end, though, if Bryce Hopkins is not playing his best, Kentucky could win this game too. Because Bryce Hopkins is a lot of Providence's offense. He is what makes their engine go. But I think this is going to come down to which star steps up. And I think at the end of the day, I don't like saying this, but I think Sheetway takes over, and I think Kentucky wins. I don't like saying it, but I don't think Providence has anybody that can handle him. Hopkins, I think Kentucky's game planning for Hopkins, and I think they find a way to try to make the other guys beat him. But I think Sheetway's just too much for him. I'm picking Kentucky.
Now, this game right here, I mean, is one of probably the most underrated games. Like, if you just are first glancing at the bracket, you're looking at all these big games, and then you just see this one. It's like Kentucky-Providence. That is just an intriguing game. Like you said, the storyline with Bryce Hopkins and the fact that he played for Kentucky, transfers to Providence, that whole storyline's crazy. And like you said, Bryce Hopkins had a fantastic season for Providence. I feel that they should have been a higher seed. I know a lot of people are saying that they didn't have a lot of quad one wins, but I mean, they played in the Big East. I mean, the Big East was super tough. They were consistently ranked. Like they were ranked in the top 25 all season long, like the last week of the season, but yet they're somehow an 11 seed. They were like 30th in the other receiving vote, so like ranked 30th, but yet if you do the seed lines for that, they should have been around an 8 seed because you have 8 times 4 teams, 4 teams per seed. It's 32, and they were around 30th in the rankings. But yet they're an 11 seed. I still don't understand how that happened. So I think that makes Providence a really dangerous team at an 11 seed because I think they're better than that. I mean, they played in a tough conference. Yeah, they had some slip-ups late in the season. They did, lose to DePaul. They didn't play as well at times. They struggled. But I think they're still a really good team. Kentucky, on the other hand, feels a little, seated too highly. I think that they're a good team, and they started to play better down the stretch, but they lost to Vanderbilt twice. And yes, losing to Vanderbilt this season was nowhere near as bad of a loss. Vanderbilt is improved. But still, Kentucky struggled. They were not making their free throws. They were not hitting threes. Outside of Antonio Reeves against Arkansas, he was hitting shots. He had like 37 against Arkansas. But Kentucky's guard play has been, less than desirable. Kassan Wallace, he's a great player. He's talented, but he's not a really good offensive player in this point of his career in basketball, even though he's going to be a one and done for his intangibles and his defense, but his offense isn't really there. Antonio Reeves and CJ Frederick are very spotty from three. They're just not a team that's consistent. Like you said, Oscar Tshiebwe, he will be a matchup problem because of the fact he's dominant and Providence will not be able to slow him down more than likely. But it's all going to come down to whether Kentucky makes shots. If they do, then they'll win. And it's also going to come down to how Bryce Hopkins responds to playing his former team. Because I've seen games where players play against their former team and they just light it up and have big games. But then you also have, I'm playing against my former team, and you struggle and you play bad. If Bryce Hopkins has a bad game because of that, they're done. Providence will lose because they have to get at least 20 points from him. But if he has a great game, I'm playing my former team, I'm ready, I'm fired up, they can win. So it's going to come down to whether Providence can stop Tshiebwe and how Bryce Hopkins plays. I think this is going to be a game that goes down the wire, but Kentucky is going to have to make free throws because they've really struggled at the foul line at the end of games. If they make their free throws, they'll win. I'm going to bank on that they do. I will barely lean Kentucky's way here. I really want to go Providence, but Kentucky's the better team overall on paper. But they've struggled all season. And I watched them miss like 6 free throws at the end of the Vanderbilt game. But usually when you struggle at the line at the end of one game, you don't do it in the next game. So I think that they're going to shoot a little bit better in the line at this game. I'm going to pick them to barely beat Providence. I'm going to lean that way. But I definitely could see Providence getting the win.
I hope Providence wins.
Probably a lot of people would like to see Providence win, but I will say that it should be a great game regardless. The next game, less intrigue, but you got Kansas State, Montana State. Kansas State, a 3 seed. Jerome Tang done a fantastic job in his first season with the Wildcats, former Baylor assistant. Wonderful job. Keontae Johnson, his story is remarkable. Him returning to basketball after his collapse at Florida. It's awesome to see him back on the floor. Marquise Noel had a great season. Montana State, though, scrappy team out of the Big Sky. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, just like you said, Kansas State, they were a team that they were picked to finish near the bottom of the Big 12 this year. Not a lot of people had high hopes for Jerome Tang and company. They were just an amazing story to watch. They had that really good start to the season. They'd won their first meeting with Kansas, and everyone started to say, "Oh, Kansas State, they're coming around again." They kind of made them realize they beat Big Brother. Like, this is when you beat Kansas, you kind of wake some people up around the world, and they did that. And Jerome Tang got this team to the tournament, and they're playing the Bobcats of Montana State. Rare, but anywho. The Bobcats, they're scrappy. They are a team that I think could give Kansas State some problems, because especially if Kansas State has one of their games where they're just sloppy and turns the ball over, Montana State they can get scrappy, and I force some turnovers on them. I think Montana State could make this an upset game.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that Kansas State should win this game, though, easy. I think they should come out and play with energy and intensity and say, we're the better team. Let's show it. But I wouldn't be surprised if they come out lackadaisical and Montana State comes out a little more hungrier at the beginning. But I want to say Kansas State's offense and talent takes over, and I think Kansas State wins this game. But don't be surprised if this is a close game, because Montana State they can scrap.
For sure. Thanks for being here, Traveling Fools. Also, Teddy Boy, thanks for coming back on. So we got this game right here. I mean, you've got Kansas State, Montana State. Should be a cat fight. I mean, it should be a really good game. And you got the Montana State Bobcats. At least somebody still named the Bobcats, since you don't have Charlotte anymore. But I think that this game, besides all the cat jokes, I think that you've got a really high-flying matchup here. Should be a great game. But Kansas State's a team that they're way more talented, and that's obviously the case. So that's the 3-14 matchup. Montana State, they have scrappy players. They can shoot the ball, and they've had a great season. But Kansas State, all they got to do is just play the way they played in the middle of the Big 12 season when they were on a roll. Keontae Johnson, just drive to the lane, get fouled, hit free throws. I mean, Montana State will not be able to put a guard on him. So I think that if you look at Kansas State in that respect, Marquise Noel, he sometimes is turnover prone. Can't turn it over. If he does not turn the ball over, then I think that Kansas State should easily get this win because they have the better talent. They have, the athleticism. They have, the fight and the drive, the fact that they've had such a great season. You don't want to go out, early on like that, to Montana State. I think they will get the win. As long as they don't turn the ball over a lot, they should cruise to a relatively easy victory.
Yeah, I agree. Keontae Johnson, he's a matchup problem that Montana State will not solve, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Teddy Boy asks, has everybody made their Final Four picks yet? Now, we've kind of like roughly, me and Austin have, kind of roughly picked their teams. We've you feel like Duke's a sleeper. You've got Kansas and Houston and Alabama. UConn, Marquette possibly, but nothing really definitive. It's just so early. So our next game, we got another 7-10 matchup with Michigan State and USC. This one, you've got the legendary Tom Izzo, especially with all the great coaches that are starting to whittle out in college basketball, the longtime coaches. You've got, Tom Izzo is one of the last ones, along with Bob Huggins and a few others that are still coaching. And you've got USC, Andy Enfield, a very underrated coach. A lot of people remember what he did at Florida Gulf Coast, but he's at USC. He's been there for a long time now, and he's had some pretty good teams with USC. This should be a really good matchup. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, this is a game I'm looking forward to watching. This is one of the games when the bracket was revealed, and I saw Michigan State, USC. I'm like, this is the game I want to see. Mm-hmm. Because USC is an interesting matchup. Because they're a team that's very intriguing because they have a couple of all Pac-12 first team players in Ellis and company, and Michigan State. They had that terrible shooting happen midway through their season. God rest their souls. We don't wish that upon anybody. That sucked. And Michigan State, I think that it kind of hurt them because, they had that epic collapse against Iowa. That was one that they just got away. But in this game, though, this is going to be fun because USC is a very good rebounding team. They're a team that can get on the boards, get in the paint. And they're a team that can make you pay if you're not careful. But Michigan State, if they're hitting threes and playing offense, they're a team that can make a run in March because that's Tom Izzo's DNA. He's a guy that plays some solid defense, shoot the ball well, don't turn the ball over, don't beat yourself, make your free throws, and you'll win. And I think, honestly, this game's going to come down to the defensive end of the ball because USC at times has shown that they can play some good defense, but they've also shown at times that they cannot. Michigan State, can they defend the three? If they can can defend the three and hold USC under a low shooting percentage, Michigan State could very much win this game.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I want to say I'm leaning towards USC in this game. I think their size, and I don't think anybody can match up with two big guys in the paint. And I think with that, I think Michigan State will struggle with that. And I think that and they'll beat themselves with the turnovers. And USC will capitalize on that. I'm going Trojans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really solid pick. I mean, you look at this game, again, you've got the legendary Tom Izzo, and that helps Michigan State. He's been with the Spartans for so many years, and that's going to definitely help out their prospects in the tournament because of the experience that he has, and he's going to get his players ready. And a lot of the players on Michigan State's team, they've been in the tournament before. They've been with the team for a while. Joey Hauser's a really good player, and they have talent. But the problem for Michigan State is they don't have depth. The depth is an issue. They don't, have enough players off the bench that are really good contributors, especially in big games. And I think that, overall, Michigan State's a team that I'm actually surprised is a 7 seed. I thought they'd be a little lower because of the way they played down the stretch. They really struggled down the stretch of the season. Like you said, that Iowa game really hurt them. They were winning, and they just, I wouldn't even say fell apart. Iowa just started hitting shots. I mean, sometimes you got to just give credit where credit's due. They're making shots. I mean, Michigan State only missed like 2 free throws out of like 10 attempts, and somehow Iowa was just hitting all those threes, and they came back. But Michigan State's depth will be an issue. USC, I mean, to Teddy Boy's point, he's got Michigan State winning that game due to Tom Izzo. He's got the experience. Andy Enfield, he's been at USC for a while, though. He's been at USC for about a decade. He has the Florida Gulf Coast, run that he had under his belt. So I think that they can win. Boogie Ellis is a really good guard. They have talent. USC is a really talented team. They have talent, and the Pac-12 did not really give USC that many opportunities to showcase that talent because the conference didn't have enough good teams outside of Arizona, UCLA. So they're a really good team. This one, just going back and forth on, but I actually agree with you. I think USC will find a way. I think Michigan State, they have the more experienced coach, but their team's been very inconsistent, especially down the stretch of the season. USC's been playing better. I know they lost Arizona State, but they have been playing better at the end of the season. I think USC will find a way to win a close one. I think it could go either way, but I'm leaning USC as well.
Yeah, the thing that worries me, though, is A.J. Hogarth for Michigan State. If he's starting to feel himself and hit his shots, then you're looking at a whole different Michigan State team. Because when he's feeling himself, Michigan State's a whole different team. But I still think USC comes out at the end.
For sure. He definitely will be a matchup problem for USC if he's hitting his shots, but he's a very inconsistent player, and they kind of go as he goes for sure. So you've got Marquette and Vermont as the final game in the East region. This one, Marquette is a team that I've mentioned as possibly could be a Final Four team. They're really good. They ended up at the top of the Big East, which was a tough feat considering how great that conference was this year. But Vermont is a sneaky good team out of the American East. They're a team that's been in the tournament several times in the last few years. They have a lot of experience. This could be a really solid game. So what's your take on this one?
Yeah, this game here, Marquette, Shaka Smart and took Marquette to the Big East title. They won it handily, beating Xavier, and a lot of people are buying the Marquette hype that this is the year that Marquette could be a Final Four team, possibly sneaky, because of the bracket they ended up in. But to Jeffrey's point, Vermont's not a team to sleep on. Vermont's a very good team. They are a team that I think could very well beat Marquette. If Marquette's not playing the way that they played in the Big East tourney, look out. We've got another upset on our hands. Because Vermont is an elite team from three. They shoot the three at an elite level. And Marquette has had trouble defending at times. And I think that could be the biggest difference. Because if Marquette can't defend that three against Vermont and get down, Marquette could be in trouble. But I want to say Marquette has more talent, and I think that should win the day at the end. I'm gonna lean Marquette because I think that they're going to keep this momentum going. I think Vermont just gets outplayed and out. The talent is just too much. But if Vermont's hitting their threes and forcing turnovers, Marquette could go down. But I'm going to say Marquette's talent wins the day.
Mm-hmm. Teddy Boy says, what region you think is the toughest? I think the Midwest region is the toughest. Yeah, that region does look really tough. The South, a lot of people have said the South, including a lot of, experts. I think that the West is pretty tough as well. I mean, all three are really tough. This one seems to be the one no one's, really saying is the toughest. I think they're all, really deep and have a lot of good teams. But it's like to Ever's point earlier, none of these games look like shoe-ins because it's just so much parity this year. But I do agree with you, Teddy, that, I mean, this the Midwest region does look really tough. But I think all of the regions could be really, really tough this year. But to the Marquette-Vermont game, I mean, like you said, and I said as well, Vermont is not a team to sleep on because they've been in the tournament several times and they have, capable players and they have capable coaching. They have, the stability of, their head coach. They've been in the tournament several times in the past few seasons. They're used to this and they are capable of winning this game. I don't think Marquette's the best matchup for them because they're deep and talented and they came from the rugged Big East, so they're prepared, for any type of game, however, type style Vermont wants to throw at Marquette. So I think overall, this is a game where if Vermont was seeded a little bit higher, like a 14 or a 13, and they were playing, one of the 3 or 4s, I think they have a better shot to win. Marquette, it's possible they could lose this game, but as long as they just play a B-level game, they should easily get by. And I think their talent will find a way to get a relatively easy win. But if they play badly, Vermont could, get a close one on, maybe find a way to win. But Marquette has a lot of talent, so they should find a way. So that is the East region. A lot of good games. I mean, there's a lot of good matches. A lot of, we feel Purdue, is in good shape. Memphis for Atlantic, we kind of debated on that between the two. That one should be a really good game. Duke, tough game against Oral Roberts, but they're playing really well. Tennessee, Louisiana, could be an upset. But a lot of good games. Kentucky, Providence as well. I mean, we feel like Kentucky might squeak it out.
Michigan State, USC, that could be interesting. Tennessee, Louisiana could be a sleeper game to watch. I mean, the East could have some upsets in it.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of big games, but now we're on to the first 4. And, these games are, interesting. You obviously have the 2 16 seeds and the, and then the 11 seed games. But to start out, you've got Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Southeast Missouri State. What do you think about this matchup?
I'll be honest. I haven't kept track with either of these teams much this year because they are in the smaller conferences. But what I have caught them in their conference tournaments, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, they're kind of intriguing because at times they look like a team that can just shoot the lights out of the building. But then there's other times they go cold and they kind of go in that drought. And they see if they get behind, they panic. As with Southeast Missouri, they're a team that is very good, in transition and has a couple players that, are under the radar, and they have a guy who could play really, really solid defense. A lot of people think he should have been Defensive Player of the Year in their respective conference. This is a tough matchup, but I'm thinking Southeast Missouri State wins. I think transition offense for them rules the day. I think the transition offense wins it for them.
I mean, to your point, I mean, no one's going to really know much about these two teams. No disrespect to them, but they are really small conferences, which is why they're in the 16 seed game. But Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, they've, made some noise in the tournament before. South Missouri State, like you said, they have some good players as well. But I think Texas A&M Corpus Christi might pull out this one. Both teams are fairly solid, in their respective conferences. But Texas A&M Corpus Christi's made more noise recently. I think they'll maybe find a way to get it done again. But who knows? Both teams will probably fight really hard, and to be able to say that they can move on. But unfortunately, the winner has to play Alabama, so that should be probably where their journey ends. Whoever wins.
What a consolation prize! What a consolation prize!
So our next game, a very interesting out west affair between Arizona State and Nevada in the first four. That's an interesting game. A lot of people feel that potentially these two teams should have missed the tournament, especially Arizona State, but they squeaked in. What is your take on this one?
Yes, this is another game that I'm kind of looking forward to watching because Nevada, another team, another solid defensive team, a team that has been in tournaments in years past have made some noise. And Arizona State, had that incredible win against Arizona and then that win against USC. I think those two games kind of saved their season, so to speak. Because if they don't win at least – I'm going to say at least if they don't win the Arizona game, I don't think they're even to this point. Just seeing how the committee put them in that first four where they got to play their way in. So something tells me they don't win that game. They ain't even here at the moment. But yeah, this game is going to be really, really good. I suggest everyone tune in and watch it because this is going to be some fun basketball played at the highest level. But I think Nevada steals one here. I think Nevada is more scrappy. They're the underdog in this situation. I think Nevada's defense gives Arizona State an issue because Arizona State has played mostly offensive teams in the Pac-12. There's been some good defensive teams in the Pac-12, but they haven't played nobody like Nevada has that can play some defense. And I think Nevada gives them issues. I think Nevada wins just for the fact their defense causes problems.
Now, Teddy Boy says Arizona State wanted Arizona. I think they'll beat Nevada, which you mentioned that game for sure. And I completely agree with you. That is why Arizona State's here. Plus, they did beat USC in the tournament, in the Pac-12 tournament. If they don't win that game either, they probably fall short. But Nevada is a team that I was really high on earlier in the season, but they started to slip up down the stretch of the season. I still think they're really good. I think the Mountain West as a whole is a really good conference this year. But Nevada was starting to, struggle down the stretch, kind of like New Mexico. Not as much as New Mexico, which is why they made the tournament. New Mexico did not. But I think that overall, if Nevada plays like they have the last few weeks, then I think that they will fall short. Now, if they can regain their earlier form and, like you said, embrace the underdog role in this game and play like they were earlier on in the season, then they can win. They have a really good team. But Arizona State has been playing much better. That game against Arizona, when they hit that three, it ignited something in them. They've been playing much better basketball. I think Arizona State will find a way. Bobby Hurley, I don't know how far he's going to go in the tournament, but I do think he'll squeak one out against Nevada. Be a close one, though. So the other 11-11 game, you've got Mississippi State and Pittsburgh. So again, if that we're still watching, the two teams that a lot of people thought, between NC State, Pittsburgh, and Clemson, a lot of people were like, two teams, are they going to make it out of the three? It's probably two of the three. Clemson was the one that didn't make it. NC State and Pittsburgh did. And you've got Mississippi State out of the SEC. They really struggled in SEC play, but they got enough wins, I guess, down the stretch for the committee to put them in. What's your take on this game? This is an interesting game.
Yeah, I would like to say, a lot of people thought Mississippi State should have been safely in, before the SEC tournament started. And I don't know why people got that notion. I mean, they had 20 wins, I believe, going in. And the thing with Mississippi State is they're so confusing. One game they're really good and they're playing their best basketball. Then the next game they lay an egg. And it's like, okay, which Mississippi State team are we getting that day? And Pittsburgh's kind of in the same boat. A lot of teams thought Jeff Capel, great job, A lot of ACC Coach of the Year, all that. But Pittsburgh was also in the same boat where one game they come out shooting threes and they're hitting everything and they're playing their best basketball. Then the next game they lay an egg against the smaller teams like Georgia Tech and Boston colleges and those likes, and it makes you wonder, okay, which Pittsburgh are we getting? The team that's supposed to rule the ACC or not? But I think in this game, I think this is going to be a really good game. I think this is going to be the game of the offenses. I think both teams are going to be hitting their shots this game, but I think Pittsburgh has more shot makers. I think they have more depth on their bench. I think Pitt wins, but not by much. I think Pitt wins by 3 or 4. I'm going Pittsburgh.
Edward says I'm still here. I was just wondering, just throwing out the Clemson that, making an argument they should have been in, man. But thanks for still tuning in. You got this game here, though. I mean, Mississippi State and Pittsburgh, a lot of people don't think the ACC, was that up to snuff this year. Really, a down year for the league overall, which is why a lot of people feel teams like Pittsburgh and NC State, Clemson, and other teams had better years. But still, I mean, somebody has to be good. In Pittsburgh, to be fair, they actually at times played really good basketball. But they started to slip down the stretch. When they beat Carolina earlier in the season, they were looking really good. But then they just kind of started to fade a bit. They had an injury to one of their players, and then they just started to kind of fall apart a little bit. But they found a way to stabilize at the end and get enough wins to be here, for the committee to put them in. Mississippi State's an interesting team because they started out the season well in non-conference play, and then they started out SEC play like 3-7 in the league, and they just looked awful. But then they started to bounce back and play better basketball. Some people might be surprised they made the tournament, both these teams really. But that's why when you're this close, there's going to be a lot of people that don't feel that you belong. But this is going to be a game where, like you said, the style of play is going to be, for both these teams is going to really affect who wins. I think Mississippi State is a team that matches up well with Pittsburgh. They're both very physical teams. They play really hard. Sometimes when their shots are not falling, that they get in their defensive form and they're playing really well on that end. They're kind of like Virginia in that regard, that they can start playing really good defense, both teams, when their offense isn't there. But I will say that Mississippi State has been more inconsistent to me than Pittsburgh. Even though Mississippi State started to play a bit better down the stretch, they've been a really inconsistent team. Pittsburgh's been inconsistent, but they've played better more often. I don't know if that's because they're in the ACC and Mississippi State was in the SEC. But Pittsburgh's been more consistent. I think they'll find a way to win as well. I think Pittsburgh, Teddy Boy is very confident Pitt will win in a blowout. I don't know. It could happen, but I think it'll be a really close, hard-fought game, and I think I'm leaning Pittsburgh. They'll probably find a way. So for our last first 4 game, you've got Texas Southern, the team a lot of people are crowning as the worst team that made the tournament because they're 14-20, but they won their, conference against Fairleigh Dickinson. What do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, Texas Southern is one of those rare occasions where one of the big stealers, so to speak, where they're 14-20, they shouldn't even be nowhere near this thing, but by virtue of winning your conference tournament, you get the automatic bid, and the committee has to put you somewhere. And a lot of people are saying, they should get rid of that because if you don't have a winning record, it's taking a spot from a team like, say, Oklahoma State, who a lot of people thought should have been there. But I think Texas Southern, they did win their conference, so they're full by the rule book. They should be here. And FDU, Fair Dickerson, don't know much about them either, other than they're a team that can shoot the ball. They play well team basketball. I think honestly, I think Texas Southern's going to come into this game with a chip on their shoulder, and I think they win. I think Texas Southern wins this game. I'm going a little upset here. I think Texas Southern with that chip on their shoulder, and I think they want to prove people that they belong here, that it wasn't a fluke, and I think they beat Fair Dickerson. Now, their consolation prize is Purdue, so be that as it may. So, enjoy this win while you get it, if you get it.
Yeah, even though they got to go up against Zach Edey, whoever wins, I will say maybe that might be a little bit of a better matchup than going up against Alabama. That'll be really tough, but both will be tough. But this game right here, you've got Texas Southern, you got Fairleigh Dickinson. So I think both these teams, they're, obviously at the bottom. That's why they're both 16 seeds. But Texas Southern, 14-20. To your point, have the chip on the shoulder. Could be, knowing that a lot of people don't believe in them, and we're going to come out here and upset, hit the win over FDU. But I do think Fairleigh Dickinson's going to get the win. I think that they're the better team overall. Texas Southern, they have, the potential to play really hard to get this win, but I'm going to lean more toward FDU. I think that FDU will get the win. So that wraps up the first four. So on to the next region. We've got the Midwest region. And you've got a lot of great matchups in this region. You've got at the top Houston and Northern Kentucky. A lot of people are talking about Houston, whether they should have been a 1 seed or not, because, the way they finished, the season against Memphis, yesterday. And overall, Marcus Sasser's injured. Will he be healthy? How's he going to play if he is playing for Houston? So, you never know. 116 UMBC did beat Virginia, but what's your take on this game here?
Yeah, so Marcus Sasser is a big piece of this Houston team. Him and Jamal Shed, they make a lot of this engine run. And, give credit to Kelvin Sampson, getting Houston to Elite Eights and winning the American conferences, but it's time for Houston to, take this next step. Can they be this Final Four, this championship team that they always hope they'd be? But if Houston's healthy, Houston should easily beat Northern Kentucky. I know Northern Kentucky has been a team in the past where they give teams trouble, but I think if Houston's healthy and Sasser's there, I don't think they're no match for. I think Houston handles Northern Kentucky easy. I'm picking Houston. I just don't see a way Northern Kentucky wins this game. I think Houston's just too good, too talented, and I think Kelvin Sampson wants to prove that this is their year. It sucks for Northern Kentucky that they ran into this. Wish there was a better team they could have played.
And Teddy Boy said, were you guys surprised Penn State had a shot to beat Purdue at the end? I mean, Edwards not surprised at all. He says Purdue's overrated. But, it was a really good game. Both teams had fatigue. I probably wasn't too surprised, but, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was like, oh, it was going to happen that Penn State was going to be close. It was a little surprising, but definitely not overly surprising. But in this game between Houston and Northern Kentucky, I agree with you. Unless Marcus Sasser is just not healthy and he's trying to play and he's not playing well at all, or he can't play and Houston's just sloppy and they keep Northern Kentucky in the game, there's an outside shot that they could get upset because Houston was really sloppy against Memphis yesterday. It goes to show you that they're not the same team without Marcus Sasser. But still, Memphis is way better than Northern Kentucky. This is not a good matchup for them. Houston's a really good team. Jarris Walker is a matchup nightmare for Northern Kentucky, a 6'8", 240-pound forward that they're not going to be able to put a body on him at all. He's going to dominate. His raw athleticism and talent is just going to get him points. He does struggle at times with, turning the ball over at times, and he takes bad shots. But I do think that in a game like this, he'll easily be able to show his NBA-level athleticism. I think Houston's the more talented team by far. Kelvin Sampson wants to prove that Houston's not a fluke. They're going to find a way to easily win this one, I think. I'm with you there. And Teddy Boy, I'm picking Iowa over Houston second round. He says I'm calling. That is bold for sure. And up next is Iowa. You've got Iowa and Auburn. This is a really good game right here. Iowa's a team. They're streaky. Sometimes they're shooting their threes and they can't miss. And then at other times, they really struggle on the offensive end if their shots are not falling. You can see a game like Michigan State that they're down by 13 and they came back and won in overtime. They can get hot from three in a hurry. Auburn's been up and down this year. What is your take on this game?
Yeah, this is another game. I'm kind of looking forward to, because it's a clash of styles. You got Iowa, who's the team that is like you said, if they're hitting their threes, they are a dangerous team to play. But if they're not hitting their threes, they're very much beatable. Auburn, on the other hand, they're a team that plays their defense and goes through a rotation. They have a deep bench, and they're a team that shoots the three. And they're the same way. If their shots are going, Auburn's hard to beat. But I think in this game here, it's going to come down to who hits shots. And I think at the end of the day, I think Auburn wins this game just off the fact I think Iowa goes cold. And I think it's just going to be one of those nights. And I think Auburn's defense steps up. And I think Auburn wins this game off their defense, and they hit enough shots. And Iowa struggles when defenses smother them.
That's a really good pick for me with Iowa, and this is crazy, but you look at Iowa last year. They won the Big Ten tournament, with Keegan Murray, and they beat Purdue in the championship game, and then they played Richmond in the first round and lost. And that's it. Iowa just one game they were really good. Next game they were really bad. Well, Iowa loses in the first round of the Big Ten tournament to Ohio State, and they were not shooting the ball well. At the end of the regular season, they played Iowa at they played at Indiana in Assembly Hall, and they got the win because they were making threes. They won on their own floor at Iowa against Michigan State because they came back and won that game. So at the end of that game and against Indiana, they shot the ball well. Then they played Nebraska on their own floor on senior night at Carver Hawkeye Arena, did not shoot the ball well. They did not shoot the ball well against Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. So I think that overall they're up and down. Since they ended their season down, having a bad game from three, in a weird way, it makes you feel like this game they're going to turn it around and shoot well again because they're just so up and down. They ended last season in the Big Ten tournament playing well, then they lost. I think this time, I don't know how far it's going to take them, but I do think that Iowa will get the win over Auburn because they had a bad game to end the season shooting the ball. I think they're going to rebound and shoot well this time from three. Auburn's been so inconsistent as well. And plus, Iowa's just a bigger team overall than Auburn. Auburn has a lot of smaller players. I just think that overall that it's not really a great matchup. I think as long as Iowa makes shots, they have a really good shot to win. I could see Auburn winning if Iowa doesn't make shots, but Iowa is due for another good game. I think that they'll find a way to win. So on to our next game, you've got Miami and Drake. This one's interesting. Miami's got great guard play. Miami's been one of the better teams in the ACC this year. And Drake is a really good Missouri Valley team that was in the tournament as an at-large a couple years ago. So what's your take on this one?
Yeah, Miami and Drake. This is an interesting game because this matchup here, when it was revealed that Drake's playing Miami, I immediately said, This is a game that Miami could lose because Drake is a very well-rounded team. They don't have one guy that necessarily can beat you. Like, they play team basketball. And I think Miami, with Isaiah Wong and company, he is the guy that leads the charge for them. If Isaiah Wong is hitting shots and Miami's rebounding and running, it's going to be a long night for Drake. But if Drake can play their style of basketball, passing, making Miami get down in defensive stance and play a little defense, Drake could win this game because Miami cannot guard as well as some of the other teams in the ACC can. Miami relies on a lot of their shots going in and getting up big time and running in transition. If Miami gets down in this game, Drake could win this game. And it makes you wonder sometimes too. If you're looking at it from Miami's point of view, you have to kind of start hot. You can't have a lackadaisical start, especially now that it's a win or go home mentality. And because Miami's done that a couple times this year, especially on the road, where they come out a little sloppy and gotten down and they've been able to find ways to win those games. But most of the time when they've gotten down, they just don't fare well. And I think if they get down here, it's going to be the same thing. And Drake's a team that is very, very dangerous. But I'm going to say Miami, but I'm going to say it reluctantly. I think Miami, I think they have enough guard play, especially with Isaiah Wong. I think their big men will out rebound Drake. But I wouldn't be surprised if Drake comes out shooting and they hit a couple shots that we see upset here. I'm going Miami.
Yeah, you are absolutely right about, the type start that is needed for Miami to win this game. If Miami starts out slow, Drake could win because they are a very fundamental basketball team, and they're kind of one of those teams as well. Once they get the lead, it's really hard to get it back because of the way they play. They make it hard for you to come back. Now, Miami, though, their guards are elite, as Teddy Boy and Edward have been talking about. Edward says Miami's more guards than Shawshank. Teddy Boy says, yeah, Wong is really good. And Edwards says it's not just Wong, it's Pack, Miller, Poplar, Joseph, and Beverly. They just have a really, good team full of guards. Their front court is a problem. They only have Norchad O'Meara, 6'7", but he's really good. As Edward said earlier, he's built like a tank. But still, post play is going to matter. But you look at Drake. They're not a team that's really going to be able to expose that. I think as long as Miami – can get the ball to O'Meara in the block, and he's able to have a relatively good game of like 18 and 10. And as long as Miami hits 8 or 9 threes, they should be able to get by Drake. But if they struggle from deep and Drake is, controlling the game and playing at their pace, then I definitely could see an upset. But I'm going to go with you as well. I think I'm going to lean Miami. I think that Miami is way more talented. They have so many good guards. It's going to be a problem for Drake. And it's going to be really tough for Drake to be able to control the pace against a team full of great guards. Should be a good game, though.
Mm-hmm.
So up next, we got Indiana and Kent State. You got Indiana has their highest seed in the NCAA tournament in 10 years. They have not been a 4 seed or higher since 2013. It's 2023. So it's been a long time, but Indiana is a 4 seed in the tournament, playing number 13 Kent State. And even though they're a MAC school, Kent State is dangerous. So what is your take on this game here?
Yeah, Indiana, has finally gotten back to the tournament. Indiana's finally back to relevancy, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this game, a lot of people don't realize that they're the unsung hero here. A lot of people give Trace Jackson Davis the credit and the love, which they should. He's obviously arguably the Big Ten Player of the Year, maybe even National Player of the Year in some people's eyes. Mm-hmm. But Jalen Hood-Schifino has been a really good player for Indiana. I mean, he's shown very good strides of being a good player. He had 35 against Purdue in Purdue. I mean, he's a guy that when Trace Jackson Davis is being doubled and sometimes he would tripled or he just ain't hitting his shot, but Schifino comes alive. And Indiana's very versatile. And I think that's going to help them if they want to make a deep run in this tournament. But Kent State is a team that can run the floor, and they like to play fast paced, and they're a team that likes to share the ball in transition. They're not a team that takes a couple dribbles, step in. They're a team that dribbles, step, shoot, or dribble, step, pass, then shoot. Or they're a team that likes to space the floor, and then it opens up the painted area. And Kent State, then that's when they go to work and make their living down there. And the transition is all part of it, because then you have to worry about the threes in the corner. And I think in this game, if Trace Jackson Davis is not playing his best and Hood-Schifino doesn't come to the rescue, this could be a long night for Indiana. This really could be, because Kent State, Indiana's transition defense, ugh. And if Indiana starts the fouling early, it could be a long night. But I want to say Trace Jackson Davis realizes the magnitude of this. And I want to say he has a monster 20 and 10, maybe even throw in a couple assists. I'm going to pick Indiana, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kent State pulls this out. But I'm going Indiana.
Mm-hmm. This is a really good game, and to Teddy Boy's point, Indiana won at Purdue, then got blown out at home their next game versus Iowa. Go figure for sure. Iowa was lighting up in that game. Indiana's tough to figure out, he says as well. And Edwards said this game, well, can be Kent State stop Trace Jackson Davis. If they can, he go for 30, 16, and 10. I mean, for sure. This is one of those games where Indiana, you're a team that has a great history, and you're a quote unquote blue blood in a lot of people's minds still, even though you haven't, been playing at the highest level in 20 years. But like you said, that they're back, they're a top 4 seed. They've had a great year, but they're inconsistent. And Trace Jackson Davis has at times carried the team just like they did under Archie Miller when he was the head coach. And that's why they lost games, is when Trace Jackson Davis has to win the game for Indiana, they don't win much. When Jalen Hood-Schifino comes to the rescue, like you said, or there are other players like Trey Galloway, Miller Kopp, Tamar Bates, Race Thompson step up as well, they are a good team. Indiana is a dangerous team. They showed that at Purdue. They showed that at Xavier. They showed that sweep in Illinois. They have good wins, which is why they're a 4 seed, and they didn't really lose to anybody necessarily bad. But they're very inconsistent, and it's going to come down to, as much as people want to just say Trace Jackson Davis, it's going to come down to the other players on whether they play well in this game. If it's just Trace Jackson Davis, he can go for 30, 16, and 10, like Edwards said, and they could still lose if no one else is doing anything. But if Jalen Hood-Schifino chips in 15 to 18 points, and they can get another player in double figures like Miller Kopp, and several players have at least 5, Malik Renew as well off the bench if he can get some points, I think Indiana will be too much for Kent State, because Kent State is a team that, while they're really good, and even though they're from the mat, they're a really good team. They can knock shots down, which is a problem for Indiana because their three-point defense is not great. They don't defend the three-point line well. They're always late on closeouts for whatever reason. They don't switch well enough. And sometimes Trace Jackson Davis gets switched on the point guard or whoever, and they get a wide open 3, even though he tries to defend it. But I think that if Kent State doesn't have a great game from 3, then that will help out Indiana. Kent State's going to have to shoot really well in this game to win. And as long as other players for Indiana step up besides Trace Jackson Davis, then I do think Indiana will win this game. But it's going to be probably closer than it should be. But I'm going to go with Indiana as well to at least win their first game over Kent State.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully Indiana wins it for you, Jeffrey, but you never know.
And all I know is that you can't end Trace Jackson Davis' legendary career with a loss in the first round as a 4 seed. That would be awful. But if Kent State wins, man, kudos to them, because Kent State is a really dangerous team, and I could definitely see them pulling it off. The next game, you've got Iowa State versus the winner of Mississippi State, Pittsburgh. And obviously, we both lean Pittsburgh in this game. So I guess assuming Iowa State is playing Pittsburgh, how do you feel that matchup's going to work out in the 6-11 game?
Now, if it's Pittsburgh, like we're both leaning towards, this is going to be a game of Pittsburgh playing. Pittsburgh likes to play a high-paced offense. As Iowa State, they're a team that gets, Gabe Kalsher, he's a guy who gets red hot from 3. If he gets red hot, he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the Big 12. And Pittsburgh does not defend the 3 very well. It's been proven they do not defend the 3 very well. But on the other hand, if Pittsburgh gets out in transition, that favors them very well, because Iowa State does not play very well in transition either. So both these teams have strengths and weaknesses that both work in each other's favors. But I think at the end, if Pittsburgh gets to play in a high-paced game and they're hitting transition 3s and getting to the hole and picking up fouls and ones, it doesn't matter what Kalsher does from 3. He could hit 10 and it still may not matter, because sometimes that transition game is too much. And if Iowa State goes on a scoring drought or gets in some early pressure and starts missing shots and starts to fold like they did against Texas A&M and Lubbock when they were up by 20. If that Iowa State team shows up, Pittsburgh can definitely win this game. And I want to have confidence in Iowa State to win, but something tells me I got Pitt winning this game. I think Pitt wins 2 in a row. I think number 11 Pitt wins. I think too much speed kills at the end.
Mm-hmm. To Albert's point, he said, well, if TJD has 10 assists, that means other people are scoring those. So I completely agree. I'm just saying he can have a big game, take out the assists, and if the others aren't scoring, then they won't win. But you're absolutely right. If he's having the assists, then for sure, then Indiana's probably in great shape. But on to this game here, you've got Iowa State. They're a team that when they play Baylor, they're one of the best teams in the country. They beat Baylor 3 times. All 3 times they played them. Iowa State beat the Bears, and they were dominant, and they looked like, a top 4 seed level team. But they've had some games where they've played badly. And I know the Big 12's tough. And I know that some teams you don't match up well, and you're going to go through the gauntlet of that conference, and you're not going to win all the games. I mean, even Texas and Kansas, the teams at the top, lost some games that you kind of feel they probably should have won. But Iowa State is inconsistent. They're all up and down, and when they're shooting the 3-ball well, when Jaron Holmes, Gabe Kalshers, when they're hitting shots, they're really good. But they have a tendency to go cold at times. And like you said, Pittsburgh's a really physical team, but I do think Iowa State has, the potential to be able to negate that necessarily because of the fact that they're also having played in the Big 12. There's a lot of physical teams in that conference as well. So I think they can match up with Pitt being a physical team. I think that they can handle the physicality of the Pittsburgh Panthers. Some teams would not be able to do that if they're not used to that, but I think Iowa State is able to handle that being in the Big 12. As long as Iowa State is making shots, I think they have a really good chance to win this game. If they're not making shots, Pittsburgh can win if it's a game in the 60s, but if Iowa State gets in the 70s, there's a really good chance they can win. I think Iowa State's going to be able to handle the physicality of Pittsburgh, and I think Iowa State, even though they've been really inconsistent, and it is their first game, Pittsburgh will have a game under their belt if the scenario is correct that they win. So Pittsburgh will have the advantage of playing a team, but they might also have some fatigue. I think Iowa State finds a way to win a close one. Teddy Boy agrees as well. I think Iowa State, I'm leaning them, even though Pittsburgh, they've actually been a really solid team this year, but I feel Iowa State might win a close one. So on to the next game, we've got Xavier and Kennesaw State. Xavier's been a great offensive team this year, one of the best offensive teams in college basketball. Sean Miller back, as a head coach in his first season at Xavier, and he really, made Xavier a better team than what they were with Travis Steele at head coach. And Kennesaw State, what they've done is amazing. They have not been, in the tournament in a long time. Their head coach, did a really good job this season, overall making Kennesaw State a better team because, a few years ago they were an 8-win team. They were not very good, but they're a scrappy team. But what's your take on this game?
This is another case of, everyone's looking at this matchup on paper and saying, oh, Xavier, the best offensive team in basketball, should just walk over Kennesaw State. But also at times this year, Xavier's also looked like a team that's very much beatable. Like, if you can slow their offense down, Xavier's gotten in trouble with that because Creighton, Creighton, figured out how to slow their offense down and ended up beating them by 20 plus points, and kind of figured out the formula for that. And, like you said, for Kennesaw State, congratulations to them. Went from an 8-win team to now being in the tournament. I mean, that's a big leap. And, not many coaches can do that with a program in year one. But I think in this game, I think Kennesaw State, they are scrappy. They are a team that plays with a chip on their shoulder. They play hard. They play for each other. But I think too much talent for Xavier. I think too much talent and too much offense. I think Xavier should win this game. And they should probably win this game handily. But I think since the fact that Kennesaw State does play with that scrappiness, wouldn't be surprised if this game comes down to maybe 5 or 6 point game. But I'm going Xavier though. They should win this game still.
Teddy Boy says also makes a good point. If you slow the game down, make it about half court off, and take away transition, you beat many teams. I completely agree with that. And you look at Xavier, that you're completely correct with the fact they've had some bad performances this season. I mean, they lost to DePaul, they got blown out against Creighton. They've had moments where they've struggled. Now, part of it, they did lose Zach Freemantle for a time due to injury, but I mean, all teams suffer injury. Sometimes you just got to fight through it. But Xavier is a really good offensive team, but their offense does rely on transition. And if you can bog the game down, then, your Xavier is capable of losing. They are a team that could get in a rut offensively. They can't get anything going, and they start settling for bad shots, and they could lose. But Kennesaw State, even though they're a great story, and they could possibly win, you never know. It's March Madness for a reason. But they haven't been here. They're not used to this, even though I do think they'll play with everything they got because of the fact of that reason alone, that they aren't used to this and they, haven't been in the tournament in a long time. Xavier, they haven't been in the tournament years either. Their players really want to get this win. I think that Xavier's going to, if they control the game, and they should be able to control the game against Kennesaw State on offense, if they're able to do that, then they should get an easy win. But if Kennesaw State can't try to, find a way to play their brand of basketball, they can make it interesting. But as long as Xavier controls the game, I think that they'll be able to get the win. So on to the next game, you've got Texas A&M and Penn State, another interesting matchup, especially a lot of people talking about Penn State after the way they've been playing lately against Texas A&M, who actually had a really good season under Buzz Williams at head coach. So what is your take on this game?
Yeah, this is a game here. I don't know about you, Jeffrey, but I've been really intrigued with Jalen Pickett to Penn State. He's a guy I think could be a top 10 pick in the draft this upcoming year if he decides to go. I think he's a guy that is a versatile scorer, and he's a playmaker. He can do a little bit of everything. I like his game. I think he's a lot of the reason why Penn State is where they are at now with his versatility and with his way to lead the team. Penn State, they weren't known as a lot of people always poke at their football team, for not winning the big one and all that. This Penn State basketball team, they're starting to come around, and they almost won the big one today. But they're facing a Texas A&M team who beat Alabama, the last day of the regular season, and then played them in the conference championship game today, or yesterday technically. And a lot of people, said Texas A&M is a team that can make a deep Sweet 16, Elite 8, maybe even a possible dark horse Final Four run if things go their way. I could see that as well. I could also see Penn State as being a team that a lot of people sleeping on. But Jalen Pickett and company, they're a really solid team. And I think in this game it's going to come down to, and Penn State is a team who can make a lot of threes. They lead the NCAA in three-point percentage and three-point makes. If Penn State's hitting threes and Jalen Pickett is facilitating and creating, Penn State absolutely should win this game. But if the threes are not falling and Pickett is getting shut down, and the other guys are not contributing, like Steph Lundy and company, this game could go Texas A&M's way with their physicality and their length. But I'm liking Penn State in this game. I think Jalen Pickett, Seth Lundy, I think those guys are going to get this right. I'm going Penn State. I think Penn State could be a team that could be a quote-unquote Cinderella because they're not picked to go far. But Penn State's a team to watch out for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, this is a fantastic matchup between two teams that have definitely overperformed, a lot of preseason expectations, especially Penn State. Both head coaches have done a great job, Buzz Williams and Micah Shrewsbury. Penn State, like you said, Jalen Pickett, he definitely is the exact reason why they're as good as they are, because he runs the offense, he scores, he averages over 17 points per game, he has 6 or 7 assists per game. He's a great passer. He's a really good rebounder from the guard position. He's very physical. He gets in the post for a guard. Kind of reminds me of like Phil Booth when he played for Villanova, the way he played, or even Hunter Maldonado of Wyoming, the way he plays. Even though he's taller at 6'7", but Jalen Pickett's style of play definitely makes Penn State's offense very interesting to stop because you have to stick to their shooters. Andrew Funk, Seth Lundy, Miles Dredd, they can all make shots. And even though, like Iowa, Penn State sometimes gets cold from three, but when they're making their shots, you have to guard them close. And when Jalen Pickett can just roam the paint and back guards down because you have to stick to the shooters, you can't even double team because if you double team him, then he kicks it out for the 3-point shooters. That makes Penn State dangerous. And overall, even though Penn State, if they're not making shots, they're definitely beatable. They have enough, with Jalen Pickett all around with the passing and, the creation with the offense that he has. They can win games without shooting particularly well. I mean, they didn't even have their best shooting game against Purdue, and they almost won. They only lost by 2. So Penn State is a team that, even though they are built around the 3-point line, they are technically a team that can actually win in other ways. In Texas A&M, they're really good. Julius Marble, the Michigan State transfer, he's had a good season. They've had other really good players as well. And I think that Texas A&M, even though the SEC to me wasn't as top heavy as it's been in the past, and A&M, benefited from that and had a better season, I think they're really good. But I agree with you. I actually think Penn State will find a way. They've been playing really good basketball down the stretch of the season, even though they lost to Purdue by 2 points. And I know that the fatigue of having to go that far in the Big Ten tournament could be tough in the NCAA tournament. I think that Penn State will find a way to get the win over Texas A&M, but it should be a great game.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. Salute to the chat in the channel. Says FYI Sports Debates. Thanks for tuning in. He also says as well, not a believer in Penn State. Don't think they have the offense to beat A&M. I mean, again, you could be right, but like sometimes Penn State is a team that they've been good on defense, and when they're hitting shots, they are definitely a capable team. And to Teddy Boy's point as well, A&M had no offense today either. So both teams are a bit inconsistent. They've had rough stretches throughout the season. Penn State was a team that just a couple weeks ago was not even like they were going to make the tournament, potentially. But they got on a roll and won games down the stretch, and A&M's had a really good season as well, so it should be a great game. In the last game in the Midwest region, we have Texas and Colgate. Texas had a great season in the Big 12. Colgate's been to the tournament many times. What's your take on this game?
If Texas made a statement Saturday night that when they made a statement, and not only in the fact that they're back and they won the Big 12, but they're a team that needs to be recognized as the Final Four team. I know it's been referenced in the chat by a couple different people that Texas is a Final Four team. They very well could be. But we've also seen, we've seen the good and bad with Texas. We've seen the good, the dominant Texas, like against Kansas and TCU and those type games. But we've also seen the Texas where they're struggling just to beat teams like Oklahoma and West Virginia, which by no stretch are those bad teams. It's the gauntlet of the Big 12. Like you've made reference to multiple times, Jeffrey. It's just the gauntlet of the schedule. But Oklahoma, is a team a lot of people think, oh, Texas should just win this. And then they only beat them by 1, and people's like, what happened, Texas? You came off such a great win. And that's the thing about it too. It is worrisome because what if we get to Texas and they're coming off this high beating Kansas and winning the Big 12, and then a team like Colgate, who's not a team to be slept on, like a lot of these teams in this tournament, like a lot of these lower seeds are not to be messed with. Like this is a year where a lot of teams could go down, and I would like to think though that Texas, want to keep this momentum going. I'd like to think that their offense would be too much for Colgate. I'm going to pick Texas, but I could see a way that Texas comes out sloppy and Colgate comes out with a purpose and could beat Texas. But I'm going to say Texas wins this game.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, you look at Texas, they've been a program for a long time that's vastly underperformed in the NCAA tournament. You look at Rick Barnes, you look at Shaka Smart. They just consistently always would lose earlier than they should. They had the teams that were capable of making runs, but they never did. And then you had Chris Beard. He's gone. Now you have Rodney Terry, interim head coach, and he's done a great job. with Texas, keeping them playing great basketball. But like you said, there are still times where Texas is inconsistent and they don't, inspire, a lot of people that they could potentially be a team that can win it all, even though they have been playing really well. And you see, Teddy Boy believes in Texas for sure. FYF Sports Debates, he thinks Texas is a contender. Edwards says Texas is a dangerous team. Teddy Boy even thinks Texas is his pick to win it all. So, I mean, you look at, Texas is starting to make, believers in people, and they are playing really well, but they still have that occasional game where they don't play that well out of nowhere. And it's really surprising to watch because they are really talented. But I do think that Colgate, even though they have the experience of being in the NCAA tournament several times, I just think that Texas is too talented. And even if they play poorly, I think they still will find a way to win. It's one of those things where if Texas wasn't as talented, I think that Colgate could get the win. But Texas is a really talented team. And upsets, they happen sometimes. You never know. But Colgate, experienced team, they've been in the tournament before. But Texas is really talented. I do think that they will pull it out. So that wraps up the Midwest region. This is a really good region. You got, Iowa, Auburn could be, a great game. Indiana, Kent State, Miami, Drake, possible upsets there. Iowa State, if Pittsburgh wins, it's both who we pick. Against Iowa State could be a great game. Texas A&M, Penn State. This is a really good-looking region. So on to our last region, we have the West. And you've got Kansas at the top of the bracket playing Howard. Howard has not made the NCAA tournament since 1992. Really good story for them. What's your take on this game?
So obviously the biggest storyline in this bracket is, can the champs make it out? Can the champs, are we going to have a repeat champion? Something that hasn't been done in a long time. And obviously Kansas getting to play Howard first game. Jalen Wilson, in my opinion, is a top 5 draft pick, and Harris Jr., he's a guy that is very versatile at times. Grady Dick has his day in the sun some days, depending on how he's feeling. But Kansas, I think, could very well repeat. And I think in this game against Howard, I think they should show that. I think Kansas is ticked off heading into this game, that they're going to take it out on Howard, and I think Kansas rolls in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any upsets in this first game for them. I think Kansas rolls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Howard, again, a great story. I haven't made the tournament so long, but to your point, Kansas, even though they just lost to Texas and Bill Self was not coaching, prayers for his recovery. Seems to, going to be able to coach the NCAA tournament, so that's awesome for him. But Kansas, it's going to come down to whether they can get a lot of offense outside of Jalen Wilson, because he is a great player, but he cannot run the team. He cannot be the only major scorer. Grady Dick has to be shooting the ball at a high level. When he's playing well alongside Jalen Wilson, they are so tough to stop. As Edwards says, Kansas is super beatable. I mean, yes, they are beatable when other players besides Jalen Wilson aren't making shots. And, to Austin's point, Kansas could be the first repeat champion since, Florida in 06-07. Florida did it, but no one team's done it since. Kansas could do it, but I don't think Kansas is as good as last year. I don't think really most teams are not as good as they were last year. There's just a lot of beatable teams. A lot of teams have cracks, and even Kansas does, because they're just not a super deep team. Their bench doesn't get much production out of it, and their center play, they got KJ Adams, and he's really solid, but he's not super tall. So if they play a team that's got a massive center, they have some struggles. But for this game, all they need is Grady Dick to make shots along with Jalen Wilson. That should be enough. And if they can get a little bit of offense out of someone else like Kevin McCullough and DeJuan Harris is controlling the game, they should get the win fairly easily over Howard. But we got a massive 8-9 game here. Winner of this game, more than likely going to play Kansas. Arkansas and Illinois. This one's very, very intriguing. What is your take on this game?
Okay, so this is Arkansas, Illinois. This game right here, SEC versus Big Ten. You got Arkansas, and Arkansas has been known for defensive team. They've had their struggles this year. They had that loss to Kentucky. They played Alabama really, really close. That the shot they missed it at the end of the game. Could have easily won the game against Bama. Tough break there. Illinois, they were a team that a lot of people, in years past picked to win the title, and they just could never get over the hump. And now Illinois, we're scrapping just to get here. I think this game is going to be really, really defensive oriented because I think Illinois and Arkansas are going to have a hard time scoring this game. And I think in this game here, the interesting thing I want to keep watch for is can Arkansas return to tournament form? Because in years past, Auburn has made those Sweet 16 Elite 8 runs. They've never been able to get over that Elite 8 hump, though. They've been a couple different times, and they just couldn't get over it, get over those humps. Can Arkansas get there again? I think they can if they can play the way they know how. But Illinois also provides that threat too, because Illinois, also doesn't have that big man presence inside like they have in years past. And they're a team that likes to shoot the three as well. But I think in this game, I'm going Arkansas. I think Arkansas' defense is enough to force Illinois into some bad shots and turn them over. And I think Arkansas wins this game. But I'm going to say Arkansas wins by either 3 or 4. I think it's really close. I'm going Razorbacks.
Yeah, to your point, this should be a really close game. I think both teams are really talented. Both these teams are actually some of the most talented teams in the country. I mean, some people would probably argue with that, but Illinois has talent. Matthew Mayer, he's a talented player. Terrence Shannon, they're both solid players. Illinois has talent, Dane Danger, but they're inconsistent. They play horrible basketball at times, but then at other times they actually play really well. They are capable of playing high-level basketball, but the consistency has been the biggest issue for the Fighting Illini all season long. When they're making shots, when they're playing together as a team, they're actually really good, but then they also have times where they just look, awful and they're playing selfish branded basketball, kind of to, FYF Sports Debate's point of Indiana's like a broken team, extremely selfish. They get down early, they will fold. I think Illinois personally is more of a selfish team than Indiana. I think sometimes Indiana overpasses, but sometimes they just take bad shots as well. So I think that's kind of to your point. But Illinois is a team that takes bad shots, kind of like Carolina as well, which they're not in the tournament. But Illinois, they have talent, and when they're playing as a team, and they have times where they do play like a team, they're really good. But Arkansas is also extremely talented. Anthony Black is a really good freshman guard, 6'7", a great passer. Nick Smith, he's coming off of, an injury, and he's back, and he's playing really well. Arkansas has been playing much better basketball now that they're healthy. Yes, they lost to Kentucky on senior night, but they've been playing well. I don't think that they're necessarily to the point where, they're meeting the expectations of the preseason. Like they're kind of like Creighton kind of did, where they settled the fears. And when Creighton was really struggling, when they had some injuries, and then they got healthy, and Creighton showed they could be really good. I don't think Arkansas has gone back to that point, but Arkansas has shown flashes of the team that people were expecting them to be in the preseason. So I think if Arkansas plays at their best with their talent and Illinois plays at their best with their talent, I think Arkansas is a little bit better. I think that Arkansas will win a close one. Now, if they play bad, Illinois can win. But I think that Arkansas is a really good team. They have had a lot of injuries, but they're starting to play better basketball, and I think that they'll find a way. As long as they don't turn the ball over much and they just play really solid basketball, they can get a close win over Illinois. So up next is a really intriguing game. The mid-majors, St. Mary's and Virginia Commonwealth, the 5-12 matchup. This is a really intriguing game. What is your take on this one? This one could be a wild game here.
Yes, it could. We have a good buddy who loves VCU. I'm sure he's celebrating till the day goes long. But this game here, like you said, is really interesting because St. Mary's, they're coming off that horrible championship game loss to Gonzaga, which we'll get to in a minute because they're in this side of the bracket. But and VCU coming off a great win against Dayton. holding Dayton scoreless the last 6.5 minutes of the game. Unprecedented. But I think in this game it's going to come down to St. Mary's if they're hitting shots and rebounding. Because in the Gonzaga loss in the WCC, the West Coast Conference title game, they just couldn't hit shots and couldn't rebound. Gonzaga was just rebounding, getting second chance points. If St. Mary's is letting that happen against VCU, then they can obviously be beaten. But in VCU, they're a team that can play very solid defense and can lock up. But I think St. Mary's is just a little too much for them. I think this was a bad draw for VCU because I feel like their length and size is just going to overpower them. And as long as they control the glass and get their second chance points, I'm leaning St. Mary's. But VCU has a shot, especially if they're missing and they're getting second chance points themselves. If VCU's getting their second chance points and now rebounding St. Mary's, VCU can very much win this game. But I'm picking St. Mary's to win this game. But I think this will be closer than the experts think. I'm going Gales, though. St. Mary's wins.
I was actually exactly going to make this point, but to Teddy Boy's point, St. Mary sure is ranked high as a 5th seed. I completely agree. I was really shocked. I thought they might fall to a 6th seed the way they lost to Gonzaga. But, I mean, St. Mary's have been playing well all season long. And, they're a team that has been in the tournament before, so they probably get a little bit more, recognition by the committee than another team that's not usually. Or St. Mary's has consistently been a tournament team recently with Randy Bennett. He's done a great job as their head coach. Always has the Gales playing well. So I definitely understand why they're a 5 seed, but I could have, potentially seen them drop to a 6 with that loss the way they did to Gonzaga. But this is an interesting game because VCU has been actually playing really good basketball as of late. They've been rolling through the A-10. At one point, a lot of people thought that they were not going to win the A-10 because they were struggling earlier on in conference play, but they started to play really good basketball down the stretch. They won the conference tournament, so they would not be in the NIT because more likely they would not have gotten an at-large bid because the A-10 was down. But they're riding on a hot. They're playing really good. St. Mary's, you're coming off a low, losing the way you did to Gonzaga. But St. Mary's had a lot of time. That's one thing about the West Coast Conference that really helps is their conference tournament so early and the A-10s was really recent. You're not going to have as much time for VCU to get off that win, and prepare for the tournament. Where St. Mary's, they haven't played in over a week. So I think that benefits St. Mary's. I think St. Mary's going to have the rest. They're going to be able to prepare for this game against VCU. And I think that they're going to play much better than they did against Gonzaga. They're going to turn around and not play the way they did against Gonzaga. They're going to play much better. I think VCU overall, again, they're playing really well. But, sometimes when you're playing really well, you could have a slip up. And Logan Johnson's the key for St. Mary's. As much as Aiden Mahaney has done a great job as a freshman for the Gales, Logan Johnson should be the leading scorer for St. Mary's. But he has had games where he has played not very well, and Aiden Mahaney's had to take over as a true freshman for St. Mary's. But if Logan Johnson has a big game, St. Mary's will win. I'm going to lean Gales as well. I'm going to go St. Mary's, I think, in a close one. I think VCU can win for sure. I think they're talented enough to get the job done. They've done a really good job lately, especially at the end of the regular season and the conference tournament, the A-10. And I'm going to go with St. Mary's in a close one. In FYF Sports Debate, he said St. Mary's is better than most people think, possibly underseeded. That's what he thinks. So definitely some people, have different opinions of St. Mary's for sure. But that should be a really good game. Up next, we got number 4 seed UConn playing number 13 seed Iona. Rick Pitino and Iona, and you've got UConn Dan Harrell. That could be an interesting matchup. Maybe the last game if Iona does not win for Rick Pitino at Iona, if he goes somewhere else, that could be intriguing as well. But this could be a great game, potentially. What is your take on this one?
Yeah, this is a game where, Rick Pitino, who was at Louisville for so many years, and he got to play UConn a lot because it would always be Louisville, UConn, Syracuse, and Georgetown always in the Big East finals, and Rick Pitino always seemed to have UConn's number. And I think that's going to benefit him in this game because I think he's learned a lot about UConn and their tendencies. Yes, their tendencies has changed over the year,
Mm-hmm.
And I get that and understand that, but still, you played this team so many times. It's like you've kind of figured out, okay, yes, they've changed their philosophy a little bit, but they're still doing this, and I still understand that they're still running this way. And I think with that, I just think this could possibly be upset special because Iona, with Rick Pitino's history with UConn, could possibly play a factor and letting his guys know, hey, UConn is really good at this, but if we could do this to stop them, we've got a chance. But UConn is also another team, like as mentioned, that's a dark horse pick to be Final Four, maybe impossible, a title team. Because they play really, really well. They got a lot of good guard play and a lot of great forward play. And and a and a great big man who a lot of people thought could have won Player of the Year. But I think in this game, I'm still leaning UConn. I think their talent should be enough. But I wouldn't be surprised if this game's close because the fact
Mm-hmm.
Rick Pitino knows UConn and Iona is a sneaky good team. But I'm picking UConn to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't be surprised if it's close, though.
This game has a lot of intriguing storylines here, obviously, with Rick Pitino being the biggest one. And to your point, when he was at Louisville, he played UConn all the time. But obviously, when he was at Louisville, he had more talent than he has at Iona. Iona's a good team, and he's done a great job with the Gales. I mean, they're a team that they play fundamental basketball, and they've won, the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference tons of times, in his short time being there. It just overall, he's definitely made them a better team. And again, he has the tendencies, and against UConn, he's coached against them so many times with being the head coach of Louisville, so he knows them. To your point, UConn's not the same team they used to be, but I do think that's going to help out Iona with having Rick Pitino. But with UConn, they were 14-0 to start the season, and then they started to slip up at the beginning of Big East play. They had a bad stretch. They went like 4-7 out of 11 games, and they were really playing bad. They almost fell out of the top 25, and people were saying that UConn, could potentially just completely unravel and fall apart. But after that, they started to play better, and at the end of the regular season in the conference tournament, they played much better. I think UConn is peaking at the right time. It's going to be interesting to see how far they can go. But I do think that even though Rick Pitino and Iona, he knows a lot of the tendencies of UConn, and I think that he's going to have his team really prepare for this game and play really hard. I do think UConn will find a way to win it a close one. Teddy Boy believes UConn's going to win, and FYF Sports Debate says Iona. He says, feel bad for UConn. They had such a great season just to get Rick Pitino in the first round, laughing out loud. That's funny. And they definitely could win. They have the potential to get the job done, but I'm going to go with UConn in a close one. I think they'll pull it out. The next game, we've got TCU, and obviously they've got, either Arizona State or Nevada. We split on this one. You picked Nevada, I picked Arizona State, but, based on who we picked to win the first four game, who you got in TCU versus Arizona State / Nevada?
So I went Nevada because I thought Nevada's defense would be enough, because of Arizona conference they play and maybe would help them out just a little bit more. But in this game, TCU versus Nevada, I think this game here, it's once again Nevada's defense is going to be the story of this game. But I'll be the first to admit it. TCU, Mike Miles Jr., Eddie Lampkin Jr., those are two guys that are key pieces to this. When Mike Miles went down for TCU, TCU struggled vitally. And it shows when he's not there, TCU is not the same team. But when Mike Miles is there and he's giving you 25, 30, and he's putting in a couple 5, 6, 7 assists and some rebounds, he is the do-it-all guy for TCU. And in my personal opinion, I think Mike Miles should be Player of the Year. He's that good, but he's missed a lot of time. So understanding all that, but I just think this game here, I think TCU being from the Big 12 and Big 12 playing some hard-nosed defense, and I think Mike Miles and company understand the task at hand. knowing that we play a bunch of defensive teams every week. It's the Big 12. This is nothing new to us. I think Mike Miles and company, I think TCU wins this. I think this is in their comfort zone. They like matching up against defensive teams. I think TCU wins. And I think they could win this game by 10, 15 points, especially if they're having a really good night. But I'm picking TCU.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game right here. Obviously, I picked Arizona State to win, but like you said, Mike Miles is the key. When he is playing at his highest of levels, he is one of the best players in college basketball for sure. I mean, he is a great player. You saw what he did at Kansas. TC went into Kansas and won by 20 plus points. They are really capable. Damian Ball as well. He's a great player. TCU, Eddie Lampkin as well is great. They just have a team full of players that when they're healthy, they're one of the best teams in college basketball. When they started having injuries, Mike Miles and Eddie Lampkin got hurt, then they were struggling. And even in the beginning of the season when Damian Ball and Mike Miles did not play against Arkansas Pine Bluff, they lost that game, and that was why TCU fell out of fell in the rankings and fell out of favor in a lot of people's eyes after that loss. But injuries were why they lost, and unfortunately for a lot of teams, there's tons of teams missed the tournament this year because of injuries. But thankfully for TCU, it didn't derail their entire season. They were able to hold on without Mike Miles. They got him back, and he's playing really well again. Arizona State, they're a good team. They can get hot from three. Bobby Hurley, has the Sun Devils playing, solid basketball on both sides of the ball. They've improved as the season's gone along. That Arizona win, really inspired them. They've been playing much better, even on defense. But if Mike Miles is hitting shots and Damian Ball is hitting shots and TCU's playing, some of their best basketball like they were earlier on in the year before the injuries, and they're starting to get back to that point, then I do think TCU will win this game. Over Arizona State. They have a lot of talent. They're playing really well again, just like they were earlier in the year. I think they'll find a way to win as well. Up next, we have Gonzaga and Grand Canyon. Now, obviously, a lot of people know Grand Canyon is having one of the actually best home environments in college basketball. That is a loud building when it was a really good game for Grand Canyon. But in the NCAA tournament, they've been here before. They have some experience playing Gonzaga, who's the 3 seed. A lot of people feel Gonzaga wasn't as good this year, but they started to figure things out down the stretch of the season. What's your take on this game?
I think, like you said, Grand Canyon, that building gets rocking. I've watched a couple of Grand Canyon games. That their building does get rocking. Like, they got a good home crowd. But I think in this game, it's all going to come down to the experience of Gonzaga and Drew Timme, likely this being it for him. Because he's a guy that when he gets down in the low block area, he just backs you down and just posts you up and he hits his shots. And I see in this game here, I think Gonzaga, they've had plenty of years in the past, 21 and 17. Obviously, we're the two best teams to win the national title. A lot of people said this could be the sneaky team, that maybe Gonzaga, maybe they finally do it. They've been saying that a good bit, though, every year. But I feel like Gonzaga should win this game. Should win this game by a good margin. I feel like Grand Canyon might give them a bit of a pushback, but I think too much Drew Timme and too much second chance points and offensive rebounding. I got the Zags winning.
Yeah, I think Grand Canyon will play really hard. Again, they've been in the tournament before, so they have that experience. And I think that they're playing Gonzaga, and in a year that this is not one of their best years that they've had under Mark Few. Like you said, every year people say, "Is this the year Gonzaga is going to win it all?" They were undefeated, and they had a great chance against Baylor, but they just fell short. That was the year they had the best chance of all. But Gonzaga, they're still a really good team. They're not as good as they've been in years past. Their guard play is nowhere near the level that it was when they had Jalen Suggs and some of the other guards they've had in the past. But Rasir Bolton's been playing better. Nolan Hickman, Hunter Salas, some of those guys have been starting to step up a little bit. Drew Timme is still Drew Timme. He's still playing really well. Julian Strother is an NBA level player himself. He's been stepping up. Anton Watson. They have a really solid team. The guards have to play at a high level, and I think that their level of play will determine how far Gonzaga goes, but I do think they'll be able to beat Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is a solid team, and they have, a lot of experience, like I said, being in the tournament before. But I do think Gonzaga will be able to win regardless, even if their guards don't play their best, because Drew Timme is really good and so is Julian Strother. But if Gonzaga's guards play really well, then Gonzaga could win by a good amount. But this should be a good game, and I do think Gonzaga will win for sure. So up next, we have another really underrated game, a very interesting 7-10 matchup with the Northwestern Wildcats and the Boise State Broncos. Really, really intriguing game. What is your take on this game?
Yeah, to your point, this is an intriguing game in my book too, as well, because you've got Boise State, who's kind of like Nevada and San Diego State, along those teams that can play defense, can shoot, don't turn the ball over that much. That they play the boring offense, so to speak. But you got Northwestern, who's had a really great year. Made it through the Big Ten gauntlet, unscathed for the most part, and a team a lot of people think could be a sleeper team. A team that maybe a lot of people, don't really think can go far, but could also be a team that could pull off a few upsets. But in this game here, I think this is all going to come down to Northwestern and their shot making. Because if Northwestern is making shots and making shots, it's going to be a long night for Boise State. But if they're not making shots and Boise State's defense is harassing them, Boise State can honestly win this game. They've got great guard play themselves. I think this is a toss-up for me, but I'm leaning towards Boise State. I think the Broncos can win this game, and you know what? I've talked myself into it. I'm picking the Broncos. I'm going Boise State. I think this is a game that they can win, and that Northwestern ain't built to win.
Yeah, this is a really intriguing matchup because obviously this is Northwestern's only their second time ever being in the NCAA tournament. They made it in 2017, but they're back now. Chris Collins, he really needed this season that he had, for his job. And what a season they did have. I mean, you lost Pete Nance to North Carolina. You lost Ryan Young to Duke in the transfer portal. You lost Miller Kopp 2 years ago to Indiana. And he was able to just continue to grind out his roster, find a way, Boo Buie, Chase Aldege, to get wins in the Big Ten. They don't have the best post presence in the world, but they found a way to get wins in the Big Ten. What he did at Northwestern this season is fantastic. But like you said, Boise State, Leon Rice, he's been their head coach for a long time. His son, Max Rice, is a really good player. He's gotten a lot better this year. They got other solid players as well. They have a really good team on defense. And I think that if you look, Tyson Dagenhart as well, he's a really solid forward. I just think if you look at Boise State's team overall, they play really good defense. And if they're making shots, which they're really capable of making shots, then they're a tough team to beat. Northwestern, though, is almost the exact same boat. It's going to come down to who makes more shots, who makes more threes. Because Boo Buie and Chase Aldege are a little streaky, but they've got much better this year being consistent, unlike in years past where they would have one good game and then a bad game. They couldn't get both to play well at the same time, but now they're both playing well in most games. But this game's going to come down to who makes shots and who plays better defense. I think Leon Rice is a great head coach, and I think Chris Collins has definitely shown what he can do when he has a team that, believes in his system and they're playing at a high level. I think this game really could go, either way. Again, I think that it's going to come down to who makes shots. But I'm going to go with you, actually. I think Boise State's going to get it done. I think that, you look at their team, the Mountain West is a really tough conference. Tyson Dagenhart's a really good player. He's had a lot of clutch shots this season for Boise State. Max Rice is a really good player. They just have good players overall. Their whole entire team, is maybe not the most talented, but they play fundamental basketball, and they don't turn it over too much. They just overall been getting better and better as the season gone along. And they've been peaking at the right time, even though they didn't win the Mountain West. And Northwestern, they've had a great season. I could definitely see them win this game. They've done a lot of, good things in the Big Ten this year, and they have the shooters. They have, the potential, to maybe even advance in the tournament if they can get this win. But I'm going to go with Boise State. I think it's going to be a really close game, but I think the Broncos will pull it out in a close one. Teddy Boy believes Northwestern is going to win. And Edwards said Northwestern's laughing at Pete Nance, laughing out, leave us for UNC, then don't make the tournament. And Teddy Boy said Nance only scored 3 points versus Duke. So that's obviously hilarious there, but should be a great game overall. And our last game of the whole entire 68-team field, so many great matchups. We have UCLA playing UNC Asheville, a very sneaky 2-15 matchup. What's your take on this game?
Yeah. A lot of people are saying don't sleep on UNC Asheville. This could be upset alert city, but UCLA, they came off that heartbreaking loss, to Arizona, and Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell and those guys, are expected, to come into this, with a purpose. And, a lot of people are saying UCLA is the pick to win it all, especially if you ask Bill Walton, because Pac-12 is the conference of champions in his book, and he thinks every Pac-12 team should make the tournament. Love me some Bill Walton. No disrespect. Just thought I'd throw that out there. That's funny. But anywho, in this game here, I think UCLA, they're coming in. They're a little stewed, off their Saturday night loss. They're kind of looking at this game and saying, and you know what? Yes, UNC Asheville could very well beat us, but I believe we're the better team. We're going to go out there and show it. And I think UCLA is going to show everyone why that they are the odds-on favorite to come out of this bracket. I think UCLA wins, and I think they win in impressive fashion. I think they bounce back big time. I'm going UCLA.
Now, obviously, like you said, with Bill Walton, it's funny with the Conference of Champions and UCLA. I mean, they have a legitimate shot, to go really far. But unfortunately for them, Jalen Clark is not going to be able to return this season. That's a really tough loss. He's a great defensive player. Adem Bona, he should be able to return for the NCAA tournament, but how, effective he'll be, will he be 100%? Who knows? That's really tough for UCLA. But Jaime Jaquez, Tiger Campbell, they have to make shots. And if they're making shots, then UCLA is a really good team. Amari Bailey as well. Amari Bailey had a really good game against Arizona, but Jaime Jaquez did struggle a bit. Tiger Campbell, he missed some shots. But if they can settle down in this game and make some shots, and Adem Bona should be back, even without Jalen Clark, they still have a pretty good defensive team. If they're able to hit enough shots in this game and just find a way to slow down UNC Asheville, especially Drew Pember, the Tennessee transfer. He's had games of scoring 35 and 40 points this year. If they can keep him from, putting up that, amount of points like 35 or 40, keep him to around 25 points or so, then I think that UCLA will be able to slow down their other players, even though I think UNC Asheville does have a solid team overall. But Drew Pember is definitely the main threat. But overall, I think even though UCLA is going to be shorthanded in this game, they should easily win overall. Maybe not the most comfortable in the world, but maybe at least an 8 to 10 point win, maybe even double digits. They play really well. But I do think that UCLA will get the win over UNC Asheville, but it definitely could be a good game. So we just went through the whole entire bracket, went through all, the 68 teams, all the games. There's so many great matchups. I cannot wait to watch the games. I'm sure you guys can't wait to watch all the games as well. It should be awesome. You got any final thoughts, Austin, on some of these games, just the tournament, coming up in general?
Yeah, I think this is these brackets that we just went through. A lot of these games are we could see a lot of upset specials this year. In years past, you kind of get a feel for it's gonna be Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky. This year, it's kind of like TCU could make a legitimate run at it. UConn, Marquette. A lot of people have them on their radar. A lot of people are picking Texas to win it all. I mean, this is going to be a really fun, interesting tournament, and I can't wait for it all to get kicked off Tuesday night. The first 4 games, Arizona State, Nevada, and Mississippi State Pitt. Those should be some really good games to watch Tuesday night and Wednesday night. I'm looking forward to this year's tournament. I mean, who knows who comes out of this? I think this is the most diverse the field's been in a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to Teddy Boy's point, he said everybody ready to make their Final Four picks now. Like I said, it's so tough, but I mean, again, I think that Kansas, Alabama, Houston, maybe Duke, if they could be sleeper team to make the Final Four, those are possibilities. I really think Texas, Marquette, those teams are definitely, maybe the favorites. But to Austin's point, there's so much parity that's going to be in this year's tournament. No team looks like the clear-cut favorite. You've got your Alabamas and your Kansas playing really well and some other teams, but just no one looks like the team that's the clear-cut favorite. So much parity. It should be a lot of fun. And like Austin said, it all kicks off on Tuesday night with the first 4 games, and I'm looking forward to it. I cannot wait for the tournament. Thank you guys all for being here. Had a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on, Austin. We did this, the 2.5-hour show, talking about all these games. We probably could have talked about it for 10 hours. But, these games are all going to be great. I'm looking forward to it, and had a blast with you.
Had a blast with you too, Jeffrey. And hopefully we can do more of this in the future. And then the tournament should be fun.
Sounds great, man. I can't wait to it. I'll be definitely looking forward to doing some more stuff with you. Thanks for being here, everybody. Subscribe, like the stream if you like this kind of, the content. And again, thanks for being here, everybody. And I'll see you next time.
See you next time, everybody.